A woman wearing a hood and holding her hands together in front of her asked everyone to kneel before the emperor. Several such people in strange clothing stood in 2 rows facing each other at the edges of the path that led to the huge palace. This majestic castle was beautiful, and grace descended from heaven, praising them. The palace complex was huge, including many different buildings and a bridge. The woman standing at the edge of the path leading to the palace continued to clasp her hands in front of her and asked for this grace and praise to be gathered. A knight clad in steel armor swung an impressive sharp axe and demanded that everyone kneel before the emperor. Suddenly, there was a suspicious crack of cold iron, and the warrior's terrifying weapon began to crumble. Unexpectedly, the strong knight received a powerful blow with a weapon and could no longer stand on his feet as a result of the brutal attack. The huge axe was broken after it struck the soldier, who was clad in armor and had suffered defeat. But it was not only hammers and axes that were used by the enemies today to eliminate the brave palace knights, but also sharp spears. It was with this dangerous weapon that other knights were armed, ready to strike down enemies for their ruler. Protected by steel armor, the fierce warriors held their spears in front of them, ready to engage in deadly combat at the right moment. There is an organization in this state led by His Majesty the Emperor himself in white robes. This structure, widely known as the Special Forces, exists for one purpose only. All the strong knights who are part of the organization protect the great Emperor Lian Cavalan. The Special Assignment Unit exists because of him. A strange woman in a hooded cloak continued to hold her palms in front of her as the flames began to rage. Some of the soldiers were defeated and lay lifeless on the ground, while the terrible flames consumed everything around them. The man in white who had defeated them walked along the path and looked at the huge palace, thinking it was nonsense. It was the leader of the Special Forces Unit, Yang, who was going to eliminate the emperor with his own hands. One of the defeated knights, who was still alive, lay on the ground and continued to demand that Yang kneel. The warrior, experiencing his last moments of life, asked the victor to kneel before the emperor. A knight standing nearby wanted the leader of the organization, Yang, to die, but he bowed before the ruler. The young man, who had been thinking about this with a grim face, decided not to back down, even if his own life was at stake. Yang looked at the knights in front of him who continued to fight, but considered them to be the emperor's pathetic puppets. One of the warriors partially uncovered his face, revealing his hellish demonic nature, and continued to demand that Yang bow down before the emperor. The soldier's otherworldly essence was fully revealed, transforming him into a terrifying creature that lunged forward at Yang. But the young man had no intention of giving up so easily and raised his deadly sword. The clash of the two opposing forces caused a storm of energy and a huge fire near the residence of the country's ruler. Bright golden sparks, which brought only destruction, had already appeared near the staircase of the head of state's palace. The flames were approaching the steps leading to the throne room, where the ruler of this empire usually resided. Hearing the terrible sound of the approaching fire, a fairy with large eyes and ears looked warily in its direction. The little sorceress flew up to a human hand and cautiously asked if the noise outside was bothering her master. The long-haired Emperor Lian Cavalan, sitting on the throne in a red robe, asked the fairy not to worry because it was not a problem. The ruler looked ahead with surprise in his large eyes and struggled to understand it all. A moment later, Emperor Lian Cavalan saw his most loyal subject, Yan from the Special Forces, arrive below. In the ruler's understanding, Yang, walking with worn clothes and a gloomy look, had decided to betray his own master. The red mask with white fangs fell from the face of the brave warrior, who looked at the emperor without joy and addressed him. Leon was interested in the period of time that had passed since John became a leader, because he remembered the guy when he was still a recruit. On a special training ground called the Bottomless Pit of Loneliness, the young man went all the way from a slave soldier to a leader. Looking at Yang, Mr. Cavalan reminded him that the knight had everything, so he did not understand what he was dissatisfied with now. The young soldier bowed his head in silent aggression and silently raged at Leon's failure to understand his supposed dissatisfaction. Breaking the yellow piece of the shaft with strong indignation, which instantly turned into a deadly weapon, the guy was ready to rush at the enemy. This movement, which did not bode well for the emperor, only caused him to remain reserved, but Leon continued to watch the warrior. The leader of the organization seemed to want to rush forward with the dangerous blade and deliver a fatal blow to his opponent. Dissatisfied with the emperor's head, Leon Cavalana Yang brought the blade to his ear, where a green creature began to curl around it. At first, Yang, with dead eyes, was going to deal with this miniature swamp-colored dragon. The creature with a forked red tongue flew down, and Yang told the emperor how he had lost everything, mocking his words. A little fairy with purple hair sat on Mr. Cavalin's palm and silently stared at the knight who had invaded their space. The ruler of the state sharply squeezed the magical girl with his fingers when Yang spoke about the loss of his memories. Yang glared at his opponent and shouted about the loss of his family, his identity, and even his life. For a second, the head of the Special Forces unit fell silent, not finishing his aggressive speech, and partially lost his left arm. Behind him was a sharp sword with an incredibly beautiful hilt, twisting in the air, which was surely the cause of the changes in the boy's body. Stunned, Yang remembered something that had already happened once before, and it was connected with his life. And if the young man had been looking ahead, he was now forced to look back, not noticing the stain of his own blood in front of him. Emperor Leon Cavalin rose from his throne and felt resentment, even though he did not know how his subordinate had understood everything now. With a look of madness in his eyes, the ruler of the empire admitted that the head of the Special Forces unit was his favorite toy. Various thoughts of the unfortunate warrior flashed chaotically in his weakening mind, and he thought how futile it had been to go through with it. A voice asked Yan to wake up and get up, and when he stood up, he did not understand how he had survived with his heart pierced. Yan looked up calmly, and there was light, and rocks were visible all around, but the young warrior knew this place. Having previously attempted to fight the ruler Leon, Yan touched a huge white pillar next to him. Suddenly, a strong surprise overwhelmed the young man, who opened his eyes and looked at the unusual phenomenon. The former leader of the Special Forces unit stood before the great stone sword, striking in its grandeur and size. It was the symbol of the squad's training ground, and thousands of recruits had died in front of this huge stone sword. But the young man was also deeply concerned about the drastic changes in his own body. He was now wearing the clothes of the recruits training on the ground. An unexpected and incomprehensible noise appeared nearby, as if someone had run past Yan, who continued to stand there with a surprised look on his face. From the powerful blow of the tall man's large fist, the young man felt a sharp pain in his shoulders and held them with his hands. Unexpectedly attacked, the young man instantly flew to the side, and his formidable assailant advised him to watch his back. What had happened enraged Yan. He clenched his strong white teeth and bulged his eyes, filled with hatred for his opponent. The 12th recruit of the Special Forces unit, Roman, who had hit him, considered Yan a little insolent, but he had not changed in other respects. Clenching his muscular left hand, the soldier now remembered one moment. He looked with noticeable surprise at the one who had called him, the 12th member of the Special Forces unit. Standing directly in front of the slightly beaten young man who had fallen to his knees, Roman realized that he was not so simple. Getting to his feet, Yan asked if they were on the training ground. But for Roman, training was just an excuse. He wanted to deal with his rival. According to the 12th member of the squad, no one would care if a low-level recruit died unexpectedly. Standing with a sullen expression on his face, Yan found himself in a strange situation after invading the Imperial Palace and couldn't believe one thing. But there was a large sword that appeared before his eyes, as well as the boy's thin body and Roman's strange actions. Yang was happy to return to the past, and it didn't matter why it happened, because what was important was the new opportunity to start all over again. Now it was important for the young man not to make a mistake, because this time he was determined to get the Emperor's head. Standing before him was Roman, the 12th recruit of the Special Forces unit, to whom the young man wanted to tell something. When Yang told his rival that it was impossible for them to experience love before the age of 40, Roman stared at the young man in complete incomprehension. Clenching his fists, the strong recruit instantly rushed at his opponent, who dared to say such terrible words to him. Quickly stepping aside, Yang ironically told his enemy that he couldn't believe he had missed such a slow blow, considering himself pathetic. The eyes of the Special Forces recruit burned with wild rage when he heard the mocking words from his weaker opponent. Wanting to strike the young man who continued to mock him so cruelly, Roman ran zigzagging around Yang, unable to hit him. With a cool expression, the young warrior intended to give one piece of advice to his rival, who was glaring at his opponent with anger. Approaching the restless recruit Roman, Yan touched his body with his finger and recommended that the man close the distance and attack. Then he suddenly delivered a powerful blow to Roman's stomach, who clearly did not expect it. As a result of the treacherous attack, the 12th recruit flew somewhere to the side while his opponent stood with his fist clenched. Screaming in wild pain, Roman's eyes bulged, and he couldn't understand how a mid-level recruit could have such skills. Clenching his strong white teeth in a fit of aggression, Yang continued to instruct his opponent, urging him to keep attacking. But the young man immediately looked away from his opponent and saw a mysterious purple object flying past him. The strange pendant hit the wall and fell to the ground, but Yang couldn't remember finding anything like it. Picking up the object from the ground, the young man turned to Roman, who was lying nearby, and suggested ending the fight, since the recruit had been very lucky. The lid of the mysterious pendant opened, and the young man sat up, examining the interior of the object, where something was. Suddenly, the former leader's eyes widened as he began to examine the contents of the object. Inside the pendant found by the young man was an old picture of a boy with a man and a woman behind him. The brave warrior Yang recognized himself in this childhood photo with these unfamiliar people. Although Yang was seeing them for the first time, the man and woman looked familiar to him, and now with tears in his eyes, he accepted them as his family. Memories, love, family. Yang hadn't thought about these things in 30 years, and he couldn't get any of them, even after burning down the imperial capital. Even after eliminating all the knights of the court, the young warrior was unable to find his own parents. And now the brave warrior held this important find in his own hands. Closing his eyes, Yang brought the pendant closer to him and thought about the past and his lost relatives. Then he opened them and realized that he had almost repeated his previous mistake. A majestic sword stood before Yan, and the young man decided not to waste his life on revenge, but to escape from here. Filled with determination, the young man was going to get back everything he had lost, his life and his family. The Special Forces unit was under the direct command of the Emperor himself. At a certain period in the history of the state, the fortress of Burna fell, and a huge fire engulfed the stronghold. The inhabitants of the empire also remember the murder of the Grand Duke of the Northern Continent, which also involved this paramilitary formation. This unit, led by a well-known man, successfully completed many missions that directly influenced the fate of the country. At the head of all this chaos was the nationally renowned commander of the Special Forces unit, Yang. He was called the Emperor's right hand and the first knight of the empire, and this frail recruit was that man. How could it happen that this guy turned into someone who carries other people's excrement in barrels with a mission to clean septic tanks? The sharpened blades of the swords gleamed brightly with their cold steel, ready for a dangerous confrontation. Two recruits were practicing with swords as part of their training, increasing their combat readiness in the organization. More than 1,000 recruits are taking part in this special training session, where people kill each other in order to survive and become stronger. On average, about 3 or 4 people die each day, and their places are taken by volunteers or kidnapped newcomers. They are in a place that resembles a labyrinthine dungeon. This training ground is a dragon's nest in the northwestern mountains. Each new recruit who joins this organization is assigned a serial number. It is determined based on the recruit's abilities, and they can raise their own rating by passing an exam or winning a competition. The higher the number in the rating pyramid, the better the attitude towards the recruit, and they try to lower each other's ratings, stepping on each other's heads. In this structure, it is almost impossible for the lowest-ranked newcomers, who are not particularly strong, to survive. Yang, who continued to drag boxes, knew that if an unfortunate recruit died, another would take his place. The young man also remembered how recruits were treated as labor and training material. Yang was no longer angry at anyone. He was very lucky that, in the end, the guy was considered labor material. Lost in his own thoughts, the young man noticed the boxes falling behind him at the last moment. Someone was already shouting and urging everyone to look, and the boxes that had fallen to the floor were slowly beginning to open. Yan, the depressed guy who was quickly fixing the lids on the boxes, still didn't understand where he should look. But there were also the best recruits in this pyramid, walking past the unfortunate young man who had dropped the boxes. The girl who had bumped into him apologized to Yang for her carelessness and looked at the young man with concern. The senior recruits are the heirs of the imperial nobility who join for their own reasons out of loyalty and to continue their lineage. The training ground administration takes care of their comfort, and because of the privileges of the aristocrats, they are not infested with insects. Only the best recruits receive privileges and benefits and remain at the top of the organization's rankings. These recruits include Lorena Beowulf, Cruel Dwight, and Casa Ephraim, who were the top 3 throughout the selection process. One of them looked at Yan maliciously and did not understand why Lorena was apologizing to Yan, whom he called trash. The dissatisfied opponent reminded him of their common status as recruits, but Yan should not think that they were equals and that he, a commoner, was talking to him. The opponent called John number 974, asking if he could hear him, and said that the guy didn't have enough brains to understand others. The unfortunate young man wanted so much to split his enemy's head in two, but he apologized to him aloud, explaining that it was all carelessness. The former leader of the Special Forces unit was extremely sad to hear all this, and his eyes showed his despondency. His rival mocked him, saying that only people could ask for forgiveness, not those who carried wooden boxes. The smirking villain was sure that people like Yang should beg, demanding that the guy bang his head against the wall and ask for mercy. The unpleasant face of the malicious recruit, with his nasty smile and demand to beg, continued to stand in front of the poor boy. His opponent openly mocked John and laughed, saying that it was as if the boy was seeing a nobleman for the first time, while the poor fellow closed his eyes and tried to remain calm. The arrogant villain laughed that Yan had swallowed his tongue in fear, thinking that this always happened when meeting Cruel. Finally, the trio of top recruits went on with their business. Cruel demanded that the boy be careful in the future, and Beowulf apologized and stacked the boxes. Rubbing his face, Yang looked at them and mentally asked them to be happy with their current ranks, because it was even better for him that way. After such an unpleasant encounter, the young man continued his journey with the boxes along one of the walls of the large fortress. Suddenly, he looked ahead with great attention. Something unusual caught the attention of the guy with the boxes. Mysterious sparks flew out of the nearest door on his way, and someone was always hiding in the dark corners. The young man's eyes widened, and he suspected that Roman, the recruit, was involved in this. But the young man had a strange feeling. Feverishly thinking about what was happening, Jan considered pretending he knew nothing and then simply approaching closer. Approaching the place where the glow was coming from, the guy started talking about how hard it was for him, but a girl said she had been waiting for him. With her expressive large eyes, she looked at the boy pulling wooden boxes. The beautiful Lorena Beowulf, dressed in white, recognized the young man as recruit number 974. The most wanted criminal, whom even the Imperial Knights could not catch, was called Iron Fist Gall. This villain committed his first murder at the age of 11, and at 20 he gathered his gang of robbers, who ravaged 23 villages and 17 guilds. The mere sight of this terrifying man's huge, fearsome fist strikes terror into the hearts of many. The fearless Lorena Beowulf caught the huge Gall by the hand and arrested this dangerous criminal. By doing so, the girl who dragged his hand secured herself the position of commander of the Imperial Palace Knights. The Dukes of Beowulf are one of the 4 great noble families ruling the snow-covered mountain region of Bokbang. The knights serving the Duke believed that Lady Lorena was born to become the best swordsman on the continent. When Lorena Beowulf was still a girl, she was called a young master of the sword, for the lady had already faced dangerous snow giants. None of Lorena's opponents had any chance of winning. She always emerged victorious from battle. She, with her brave character and incredible blue eyes, was the best thing that had ever been created by the noble Beowulf family. Entering the room on the wall of the fortress, Jan asked again if the girl was addressing him, thinking that the lady had made a mistake. Looking at the girl suspiciously, the guy agreed with the knights and considered Lorena one of those people it was better not to mess with because she was an enemy. Then Lorena decided to ask differently and inquired about the goal set by the recruit in 974. While the girl was finding out the reason why the guy was hiding his strength, he decided to deal with her first. John didn't understand what the lady was talking about, but she had seen his battle with the stone sword and took it for a normal fight between 2 low-level recruits. Looking down from above at Jan's training battle with his opponent, Lorena couldn't believe her eyes at first. Seeing the techniques that set the young man apart from the others, Lady Beowulf couldn't understand why he was still at the lowest rank. Realizing that a mistake had been made, Jan became alarmed and seemed not to understand what the noblewoman was talking about. Noticing that the modest recruit was not so easy to take, Lorena decided to act completely differently towards him. The girl began to approach the young man, and it really seemed to her that Yang thought the interrogation was over. Offering her hand to the former leader of the Special Forces unit, Lorena admitted her mistake. Suddenly, the noblewoman quickly brought her palm to the chest of the unsuspecting Yan, which greatly surprised him. With wide eyes and a look of astonishment, the frightened young man began to suspect that the girl was trying to test him. He could clearly see the beautiful Lorena's hand, understood the danger of the situation, and did not consider it necessary to react. And in the next moment, Madame Beowulf struck the young man, who was not expecting it, in the face. Falling to the floor as a result, beaten and crushed, Yang shouted at her, asking why she had done that to him, but the girl only responded with a questioning look. Now she looked at the guy in amazement, thinking he would be able to block the blow, so she apologized, and Jan assured her that it wasn't him who was fighting then. The lady apologized because she had expected something else, and Yang decided to play on her pity, pretending to be a commoner who had been treated unfairly by a nobleman. With a character like the girl's, such a trick, as the young recruit hoped, was bound to work. Lorena expressed her willingness to carry Yang's boxes, asking where they should be taken, and wanted to take one, but Yang did not see the need for it. Since they are recruits, Lorena Beowulf asked the guy to talk to her informally, which is a little strange for Yan. As she continues to carry the boxes, the lady believes that higher-ranking recruits should not treat lower-ranking ones like slaves. If Lorena becomes ruler, she will defend the rights of slaves on her land, while John thinks how talkative she is. Thanks to her, the guy delivered everything safe and sound, and the girl gathered herself back together after hearing words of gratitude from her companion. As she was walking toward the exit, Lorena said that she might be mistaken about something, and Yang became nervous, not knowing what she wanted this time. Suddenly, the noblewoman turned to the young man and reminded him again how she had attacked him some time ago. After all this, Madame Beowulf intends to keep an eye on Yan, which makes him feel afraid. Continuing to stare intently at the young man, Lorena wants to hope that she has made a mistake in her thinking after all. As she left, she promised to see him again, number 974, but quickly corrected herself and called the guy recruit John. He lowered his gaze, expecting this, but the girl turned out to be quite perceptive, and now it was unclear whether he would be able to escape or not. A new bold thought appeared in the mind of the former leader of the Special Forces unit, and he raised his gaze. Imagining a predatory hand on a human neck, John considers doing something important right now. Yan could easily deal with the current Lorena, but if he killed her, the Beowulf family would immediately turn against him. Opening the door slightly, the young man thinks it would be foolish to turn the family into enemies, just for the sake of dealing with this lady. Entering the bathroom, the young man decides to first escape from this complex, remembering the time when he was a commander and knew about deserters. Most of these escaped soldiers were unable to leave the training ground and received their punishment. The young man remembered one deserter who managed to escape from the training ground and was later found in a nearby forest. Yen then managed to find out from this man how he had managed to escape, and he told him everything sincerely, being very touched by the commander's kindness. The exhausted fugitive soldier, in great pain, mentioned the third section in the fifth toilet to Yan. With his own hand, the former head of the Special Forces unit touched the wall behind which his freedom might lie. Yan barely smiled, having made the long-awaited discovery. He had finally found what he had dreamed of. In the process, the young man managed to destroy the wall of the fifth toilet cubicle and find an exit behind it. Some of the bricks fell down, and a dark hole appeared in the wall, pointing the way to long-awaited freedom. Deep inside, a light was visible, still very faint, but symbolizing liberation from captivity in the fortress. Jan continued to stare at the hole in the wall, thanks to which he could gain his desired freedom. Although the gap was still too narrow, if it were enlarged, the chances of success would increase exponentially. The young man, who wanted to stop being a recruit in a place he hated, smiled maliciously and hoped even more strongly to escape from here. Continuing to dismantle the bricks in the wall, Yang firmly decided to leave a place where life was unbearable for him. In the corridor near the rooms where the recruits were kept, a roll call was taking place, and the guard on duty called out number 970, hearing from him about his presence. Upon learning of the death of number 901, the guard called out the next number, 972, and he too was found in his room. The employee in a red mask with white fangs addressed number 974, but he did not answer. Immediately suspecting something was wrong, the man approached the bars and grabbed them, thinking that the recruit might have escaped. Lazily sprawled on his bunk, Yang gave his serial number and indicated that he was just resting, but the officer on duty shouted that he needed to respond quickly. Satisfied with the completion of the roll call, the institution's employee demanded that the recruits turn off the lights, after which the candles went out. Without changing his position on the bunk, Yang came to the conclusion that in carrying out the task, he understood the need to be cautious, because the probability of success was higher. Reflecting on this important issue, the young man looked up sadly, realizing that he had only one chance of success. Even if Yan managed to escape, the entire guard would start chasing him, and then the unfortunate freedom-loving man would definitely not fare well. If the guy made a mistake, he would become an extremely frightening example for all the other local recruits. Lowering his hand to the wooden floor, the former leader of the Special Forces wanted to get a trump card that would become an unpredictable variable in the game. At first, the room where candles had been burning just a few minutes ago was dark and completely silent. Then everything was illuminated, and Yang realized that he had no choice. But he didn't know if it was possible to carry out his plan with a body like his. A light appeared around Yang, and he activated the breath of the divine dragon, a method of controlling mana that is only available to outstanding geniuses. The young man had all the knowledge, but his body was not yet up to the task. And to reduce the strain on his body, he needed to create a core for mana. However, there is not enough time for it to appear using only the breath of the divine dragon. But the young man has no other choice. Dreaming of freedom, the recruit pressed his lips tightly together, his desire to achieve his goal requiring special concentration. Finally, the divine dragon's breath made itself felt, and this method began to bear fruit for the young man. The young man's transformation began. His strong, muscular arms seemed to be pierced by bright lightning bolts. Yang did not expect such a rapid flow of mana. He felt every cell of his own body releasing magical power. The young man felt as if a dragon had entered his body, and truly incredible things were happening to him. The divine breath of the dragon is a secret technique of the first emperor, who conquered many countries with his sword and founded an empire. This powerful technique was created by a calculating ruler during his own period of apathy. While Yang was thinking about this technique, which was as delightful as its name, another thought struck him. Looking at his body and the changes that had taken place, Yang realized with fear the risk of mana leaving his core, which could not be allowed to happen. The young man's muscular body seemed to be covered with bright, lightning-like curves. Now Yang had to try to keep the magical mana inside him, so he focused all his efforts on achieving this goal. The magical actions taking place caused Yan's room to glow brightly, illuminating the surrounding area. But in the next moment, everything suddenly fell silent, and the light went out, and the room was dark and lifeless again. Disappointed, the young man bowed his head in grief, realizing he had made a mistake, and was left feeling upset. Pulling at his hair, the unhappy and sad Yan considered it impossible to create a core valuable guide to this technique, and his body was still weak. Once the emperor revealed the secret of this technique to the young man, but Yang did not know if it was a momentary whim or if the sovereign was testing him. Then the ruler gave the young man a book where he was able to learn about gathering mana, but nothing about concentration. The secret technique was not yet perfected, but now Yang needed to focus on escaping before it began. The day after everything that had happened, the young man heard about the leadership's intention to disqualify everyone gathered there. The recruits standing nearby in uniform were surprised by this information, but some of the guys had also heard about it. To Yan himself, this seemed like nonsense. He was sure that this would definitely not happen, but his friend now doubted that they would return. The young man remembered that he was supposed to come to them today, so the recruit was going to do everything he could to make sure that this person did not notice him. Roman suddenly appeared somewhere behind him and started calling Yan, who hid under his hood, amazed at his friend's persistence. And then the recruits noticed the instructor standing on a special podium in front of them and even hoped to return home today. The instructor looked at the group of students emotionlessly, lost in his own thoughts at that moment. The next moment, he rudely called out to the recruits and ordered them to be quiet, causing the unfortunate ones to tremble and become extremely frightened. People recoiled from the loud scream, and Yang suspected that it was the voice of mana, which the instructor had decided to use on ordinary recruits. Now the guy was clutching his heart from the voice of mana, a technique of adding magic to sound, which could cause fatal injury. From the top of the podium, the organization's instructor called the recruits trash, lacking both talent and status. Staring intently at this aggressive man, Yang could not have imagined that he would meet this madman again. Damien, the chief instructor for training people for the Special Forces, arrogantly asked if the recruits knew why they were still alive. One terrified blonde-haired student was already being dragged by the collar, and everyone present was ordered to be quiet. The employee in the red cloak who was doing this ordered the frightened recruits to quickly line up, insulted them, and demanded that they move. The man reminded the boys that they were being watched at that moment by the instructor, who stood on a podium. Keeping his eyes on the mentor, Yang decided to be more careful because for the instructor, they were all just toys. If the chief instructor noticed a student, it was better to try to escape. But at that moment, one could already say goodbye to life. Damien addressed the recruits, calling them respected, and said he was glad to see them all here. But according to him, they were all trash without talent or status. Looking down at the young people gathered below, the chief instructor admitted that he wanted to kill them all. Covering his eyes and putting on a friendly face, The coach asked the unfortunate recruits not to worry. Yang heard him call them trash, capable of being useful to the great emperor, and that it was not for nothing that they were given another chance. As if possessed by terrifying fangs, the mentor spoke of the opportunity still available for the boys to be selected for the Dragon Soldier Project. This project selects people who will protect the emperor, the dragon of their country, and the selected recruits will be honored to protect the ruler. But in reality, it's not that simple, because the recruits are brainwashed by implanting parasites in them. The real goal of the project is to turn the recruits into obedient puppets of the monarch who cannot die without orders. Damien called His Majesty the Emperor great and kind and suggested thanking him for the mercy he had shown to everyone. The chief instructor now wants to give a round of applause to the one who stands above them all, and he demands this from the guys on the parade ground. Looking at Damien, Yang clapped his hands and continued to adhere to the idea of remaining as inconspicuous as possible. Unexpectedly, one of the recruits raised his hand and addressed a question to the instructor, causing him great dissatisfaction. Everyone was surprised because it was Roman who wanted to know if the Dragon Squad was really that important to them. While the instructor began to explain the consequences for a soldier in case of selection, Yang skeptically awaited new words from the instructor, whom he considered an idiot. Roman, who had become extremely angry, gnashed his teeth furiously, his hair disheveled, indignant at the doubts of all those who did not believe in his ability to defeat the insolent. A long streak of light instantly pierced the chest of the unsuspecting recruit, who looked at this miracle with surprise. Stunned by what he saw, Yang learned a skill that allowed him to shoot bullets from his fingers into the air, called Tanjigan. Roman was falling down. He had suffered some injuries, and it was unknown whether he would survive. Extending his left hand, Chief Instructor Damien asked if he was okay. Looking at the injured recruit with his red eyes, Damien thought that some nonsense was pouring out of Roman's dirty mouth. While Damien considered everyone present to be useless freeloaders, some recruits thought Roman was dead, while others asked him to get up. Jan could have stopped his comrades' bleeding, and he would have survived, but it was too dangerous for the guy to stick his neck out now. The surviving Roman was angry at his mentor's words, and he was able to get to his feet after the instructor himself attacked him. The guys asked Roman to shut up, but he looked straight and boldly at Damien, indignant at his statement about freeloaders. Roman, who was seriously angry, did not understand what to call the people who had gathered all the freeloaders in one place. The poor recruit reminded them that in order to survive in these slums, he had to do any dirty work and endure humiliation. 2 knights from the guard were already leading Roman away, but he turned back and continued to call out to the guys with whom he shared his life. Even after all this, they wanted to live, and the 2 frightened children hugged each other and looked at what lay ahead of them. Analyzing the information he had heard from Chief Instructor Damien about the Emperor and the Dragon Squad, he did not understand its importance. The eyes of the fearless Roman burned with rage as he looked at his mentor and recommended that he himself defend his precious emperor. After listening to this strong verbal attack, Damien closed his eyes and called the brave recruit a rather strong freeloader. Roman, who was below, reminded Damien of a cockroach, but one that would live even if its head were torn off. The man's hand dropped down and he snapped his fingers to perform a magical action. Roman watched what was happening with eyes wide with surprise, not understanding anything. The movement of the fingers provoked the appearance of a bright magical glow, which surprised Roman even more. A crystal mole appeared, a rodent found in mountain caves and notorious despite its cute appearance. This animal is actively hunted, but it was precisely this animal that people on the site should have avoided at that moment. The crystal mole has the ability to explode and blind with its own light, which the unfortunate recruit Roman experienced firsthand. Instructor Damien watched the events below with imperturbable calm, having also noticed the wild and dangerous rodent. Roman, his face darkened by the excessively bright light, seemed to be flying in the clouds and did not understand where the mole had come from. After that, the recruit fell to the ground again, and his comrades, who surrounded him in a semicircle, asked him to move faster while Damien just watched. While the rest of the guys stood confused around the fallen Roman, Jan couldn't find his place and stared at one point. Glancing at his injured comrade, the guy immediately regretted letting the mole out. One day, Jan found a crystal-like wild rodent in the toilet and wanted to keep it. The young man hid the mole under his shirt and had no idea how the wild animal might be used in the future. The main problem for the former leader of the Special Forces unit was the chief instructor, so he hoped that he would not notice anything. If Yang was caught, it would be the end of him, and this thought filled the recruit with fear and paralysis. Chief Instructor Damien remained silent, pondering what had happened on the field. Finally, he loudly noted Roman's stubbornness, continuing to call him a cockroach, and he really liked this recruit. After that, Damien ordered that the rebellious Roman be kept among the organization's recruits. Although it did not apply to John, he breathed a sigh of relief and lowered his head, realizing that he had gotten away with it and would not be punished. Two comrades carried the exhausted Roman on their shoulders, whom Yan immediately called a stupid idiot. Roman's face was expressionless, his eyes staring into space, not making a sound, and Yan understood that this was an extreme measure on his part. In the fortress, where the warriors were gathered, there were stone steps leading down, and the path was lit by a torch. Here in proud solitude wandered the chief instructor, Damien, who recalled the events of the passing day. With a satisfied and malicious expression on his face, the instructor looked ahead, his red-eyed gaze expressing nothing good. At first, this dangerous man remembered the unfortunate recruit Roman, and then Yan finding them to be very entertaining toys. To carry out his escape plan, the former leader of the Special Forces unit decided to use the abandoned toilet in the third zone. There was a hole in the wall through which the young man tried to get out to find freedom. The dark tunnel dug by the young man turned out to be quite spacious and could accommodate one recruit. Yan crawled inside, remembering his own carelessness and realizing that 3 whole days had already passed. The 974th recruit was already on his third day of preparing to escape to freedom, but he had not taken the necessary mask with him. He needs to dig another tunnel, reinforce it with boards, and repeat the process. Overall, nothing bad has happened in these 3 days. The young recruit's eyes, strengthened by magical mana, were now able to see even in the darkness of the newly formed room. Yang continued to work hard with his hatchet, and the lack of light in the tunnel was not a problem for him. No one had come here in the last 3 days. After all, it was an abandoned place that wasn't even on the maps. Breaking new sections of soil with a sharp knife, the young man thought about the future if he continued to work in this spirit. A strange sound was heard after another blow with the knife, and Yan immediately thought that his cold weapon had hit something. Light began to shine from under the layer of black earth, stones, and the blade's edge, signaling the long-awaited freedom for the young man. Yang looked at the rays of light with great excitement. It seemed to him that he had made an unexpected discovery. In the courtyard, the officer on duty was questioning the recruits. 830, 892, and 920 were present. The officer reached number 974 on the list, but did not see him near the tall rows of huge barrels. Dressed in a red uniform, the officer on duty saw Yan approaching and demanded that he stop, as the young man smelled suspicious. Believing that the new recruit was hiding something, the instructor ordered him to remove his hood, and Yan indeed reached for his clothes, wanting to confess something. After confessing to accidentally breaking the container in which he was transporting garbage, people smelled the stench of feces coming from Yan. The instructor immediately felt ill and demanded that the new recruit leave, which was exactly what the young man wanted, as he had a plan to escape. Jan hung up his clothes and didn't know if he would be able to get rid of the smell, but at the same time he was pleased that no one else suspected anything. While working in the tunnel, the young man could not have imagined that he would hit a drain pipe in the wall with a knife. Then the recruit saw something dragon-shaped pour out of it, and now he doesn't understand what his comrades eat, but there is no reason to panic. While everything was going according to plan for Yan, he had already collected daggers, ropes, and other important tools for his future escape. The young recruit's body was also almost ready. He had previously been training with the help of magical mana, but before that, the guy thought he would pass out during physical training because of its noticeable intensity. Reflecting on how all this had paid off, Yan was already thinking about the final steps when he suddenly overheard a conversation between strangers. One mentor was telling another about a certain Gale, whose tongue had been cut off for laughing at the instructor, and the second was only afraid of such stories. Then Young heard the guard ask his comrade to hold on a little longer, because the instructor would soon be leaving. Smiling contentedly, Yang resolutely adjusted his clothes and realized what wonderful news he had heard, because the instructor would not be there. Returning to his previous place, the guy came to a firm decision not to miss such a favorable chance. The former leader of the Special Forces unit approached the abandoned toilet in the third zone again. There was no one in the open area near the forgotten sanitary facility, and Yang continued to think about his dream. Approaching the entrance to the toilet, Yang thought about the need to finish his work before the chief instructor returned. But suddenly he heard something. The guy realized that it was someone's footsteps, and indeed a person unknown to him was heading from there to the exit. The stranger's footsteps grew louder, but due to the darkness of the room, The recruit could not tell who it was. The agitated young man immediately thought of Lorena Beowulf and Chief Instructor Damien and their knowledge of his escape plan. The silhouette of the person leaving the dark building finally appeared, and Yan recognized him with surprise, without taking his eyes off him. Roman appeared in front of him and was surprised by his friend's reaction, as if he had seen a real ghost. While one reproached the other for following him but did not want to argue with him about it, the other explained that he was only there because of work. Ian was concerned about his colleague's health, as he was already moving, but Roman didn't like who people thought he was. The recruit was better off after acupuncture. The younger comrade looked intently at the older one, as if something was not quite right with him, as he had assured. Pointing to the blood flowing from his body, Yan heard Roman deny this, explaining that it was all due to acne. Accepting his colleague's point of view, Yang headed for the abandoned toilet, explaining that he had a lot of work to do. Recruit Roman smirked and did not believe what he heard from his junior comrade, considering it frivolous. Looking at Yan, Roman understood how much work he had to do, because the guy was trying to escape, which caused him surprise and fear. The man who had recently quarreled with the chief instructor looked at his comrade with an evil grin and said that if the mentors found out about this, now he wants to know if Yan is interested, who didn't like his colleague's words very much. Angry, Yan grabbed his work dagger and decided to use the 16th Dark Spirit and hunt the Dark Falcon. Such serious actions caused a storm of indignation in the recruit Roman, who bared his white teeth and was outraged at how Yan dared to do such a thing. He was curious to know who this young man, who was so skilled with a sharp blade, really was. The young recruit just looked ahead calmly, as if he didn't hear the cries of the man who knew his secret. Bowing his head, Yang thought everything over and realized that he had to eliminate Roman if he knew his secret. Hearing Roman asking why his comrade wasn't answering, Yang opened his eyes and raised his head. The vision passed. Roman was fine and thought that his comrade had forgotten his words out of fear, reminding him of the death penalty for escape. Yan did not expect Roman to catch him, as the latter thought, and even if he tried to beg him not to say anything, it could remain a secret. But the young man doubted Roman's intention to tell everything, and Roman did not like such words, so he would go to the mentors right now. Keeping his eyes on his opponent, Yan continued to assure him that it was impossible to reveal the secret of his fellow squad member. And in the next moment, he discouraged Roman, explaining that he would not do so because he hated all of this even more than Yan himself. Recalling the senior recruit's confrontation with the chief instructor, Yang saw how he couldn't hide his anger, even when he was on the verge of death. At that moment, Roman glared fiercely at his powerful opponent, and on top of everything else, felt a strong desire to return home. Digging the tunnel, Yan did not believe that Roman would report his escape to the instructor, because his comrade wanted to escape from here more than anyone else. Looking intently at his comrade with his serious eyes, Yang wondered if he could hear him. Roman responded to the recruit with a similar look and said that things weren't that simple in their situation. Remembering his previous fight with Yan, Roman felt something unusual even then, and it was related to his opponent. The recruit who had argued with the chief instructor did not forget the punch he had received from his younger comrade in the training group. Now Roman was completely sure that if Yan had made a different decision back then, his senior comrade would no longer be here. From that day on, Roman always recognized Yan among the other recruits. He had a different smell that the man could sense perfectly well. The young man looked at the man opposite him in amazement and definitely called him a stalker, not understanding what smell he was talking about. Folding his arms, Yan asked in surprise how Roman knew about his digging, to which his comrade pointed to the traces left by the young man. Recalling the granite from which most of the training ground premises were made, Roman pointed to the strange traces of lime dust there. After examining them, the recruit concluded that the length of their feet and the size of their stride matched Yan's own dimensions. Curious about how Roman had learned about the escape only from these facts, the guy found out how his comrade had looked at the records describing the escape that Yan was studying. The junior recruit perceived Roman as a rather perceptive person, although this could not be said at first glance. Now Roman asks him to share the escape plan with him. He wants to know where the tunnel leads and what the chances of success are. Near the dark places, John asked if Roman also intended to escape, but he couldn't answer right now. He needed time to think. Yin suggested that Roman stay here, as he has abilities. So if the recruit stays here for 10 years, he will achieve great heights. As he was about to leave his training partner, Yan was interested in the things Roman wanted to protect here. The older comrade had a picture of children in front of his eyes, and he could not be sure of the safety of even his own life. The photo is partially blackened, and Roman is not sure if he will be able to protect all these things in 10 years. Yana has no time to think. He asks his comrade to decide now, because if he takes the side of the younger recruit, tomorrow or the day after tomorrow they will be gone. Now Roman wants to know if his comrade in arms understands what he will do after they leave here. They continued their conversation near the dark rooms when Jan answered his comrade's question in the affirmative, and the latter in turn was ready to talk about his plans. Presenting a visual diagram depicting those who wanted to escape and the group of mentors, Roman pointed out the difference between the guys in 962 places. According to the senior recruiter's understanding, if they escaped, the instructors would notice his absence first. Considering Jan's prediction that the boys would be gone tomorrow or the day after, in that case, poor Roman would still end up in the grave. In a short period of time, the former leader of the Special Forces unit understood perfectly well how deceptive appearances can be. Not expecting such a turn of events from his comrade in arms, Roman's eyes widened in surprise, not knowing whether to take it seriously or not. They were like casting a fishing rod into the water at random, and one of the guys asked not to complain and was ready to take a big risk. When the question of what to do was raised, Roman closed his eyes and thought about it. After concentrating on the difficult moment, the senior recruiter finally opened his eyes, realizing that they had no other choice. Above the tall, pointed cliffs where the new recruits were training, stars burned in the dark night. Chief Instructor Damien smiled and hummed quietly to himself as he prepared to give a speech to the cadets. Continuing to appear cheerful, surrounded by his assistants, Damien noted the refreshing evening air. In his speech, Damien explained how he had gathered them all here at such a late hour because he had an important announcement to make. High-level recruit number 32, Kais, heard Damien apologize to everyone for having to meet at such an hour. His low-level colleague, number 525, Mabin, had heard the good news from the instructor, so he wanted to get straight to the point. Low-level recruit number 974, Yang, suggests holding the exam today if the chief has gathered them. Continuing his nighttime speech, Instructor Damien told the guys about preparing a schedule for their first exam in the organization. The rules for the surprised recruits are very simple. Each of them will be sent to a specific location, and if they last a week, they will pass the exam. With his head bowed slightly, Yang listened attentively to Chief Instructor Damien as he discussed the details of the upcoming journey. Finally, the instructor, with a smiling but not very kind face, announced the location of the first test, which was the Mountains of Blades. Young recruit Yang kept his eyes on the speaking squad leader, as he knew well about this dangerous territory. There was a story about an adventurer named Nilf, who had gone to the Mountains of Blades after learning about the herbs that could cure his mother. The pleasant young man, suspecting nothing bad, asked his mother not to worry and assured her that he would definitely find the necessary medicine. Then something incredibly terrible happened. But with his last ounce of strength, Nilf asked his mother not to worry, promising to bring back the medicine. His mother waited for his return until her death, but the good thing about what happened was that she never found out about the consequences of his journey. The Mountains of Blades are a refuge for many monsters, where goblins are the weakest, but the further you go, the more dangerous the monsters become. In this dangerous area, you can also encounter representatives of large species that easily defeat other monsters. Giant, bloodthirsty creatures, usually found only in fairy tales, inhabit the Mountains of Blades. There are monsters there that nothing is known about. Recruits can meet them today, and deep in the Blade Mountains lives it. Chief Instructor Damien, who told them about this, clapped his hands and ironically counted the guys burning with impatience. Not knowing which of these worms, as the instructor called the recruits, would still be alive in a week, he felt cheerful at the thought of them dying. The assistant standing nearby apologized to his boss, but was about to tell him something that piqued his interest. Recruit Yang, who was closely following the leadership, heard the assistant say that they had been contacted and told that an instructor was needed. Damien, who was watching the assistant out of the corner of his eye, listened to him and agreed with what he said. After speaking, the chief instructor's assistant smiled grimly, as if difficult times lay ahead for the students. Deciding that they had discussed everything, Damien suggested that everyone present disperse. Taking his hood in his hands, Recruit Yang assumed that the chief instructor was not in a good mood if he had finished so quickly. No matter how well trained the younger guys were, they had almost no chance of surviving in the Mountains of Blades, as the instructors would help the nobles, the older recruits. Yang's eyes widened when he heard the voice of a woman demanding that they move away from her. All the recruits immediately lined up in 2 rows, letting Miss Lauren pass, who outshone all the low-level recruits. Covering himself with his hood, Yan looked at this surprisingly popular figure, who was a real star here. Even people like Lorena participated in the organization's night event, and the guy hoped she would just walk by. At first, the girl walked by without paying any attention to the unfortunate recruits, as if she were lost in her thoughts. But then something happened that the young recruit Yang did not want to happen, because Lorena Beowulf turned her gaze in his direction. As if she had seen a real ghost, the girl stared wide-eyed at the guy standing among the other boys. Yang, who was so eager not to be seen by any of his superiors, looked gloomily at Lorena and realized that she had noticed him. Even though Ms. Beowulf walked past him without stopping, the young man realized that things couldn't get any worse for him. His shadow fell on the gray ground, and Yang reassured himself that he shouldn't worry, because he would definitely escape from here. Yan turned to Roman, who was standing nearby, and asked if he had done everything his younger comrade had asked him to do. But the recruit had done everything. Not quite believing his comrade, Yang asked him to look at the stone sword standing in front of them, but Roman saw nothing special in this annoying monument. When Yan said that starting tomorrow, Roman would no longer have to look at the annoying sword, his older comrade looked at him with great surprise. The young recruit was well aware of the message the instructor had received some time ago. Before the first exam, he must personally visit the royal family and report to the emperor on the situation at the exam. The chief instructor of the detachment, Damien, did not like visiting the royal palace, but he could not disobey the emperor's order. Thus, the biggest obstacle to their escape had been removed, and tonight they would be able to flee from this organization. A torch was lit in the dark room, illuminating the entire space around it, and the guard called out the number 220 of the next recruit, who responded. The instructor walking through the dungeon mentioned the 231st recruit who had been eliminated today, but the 256th was alive and responded. Continuing to review the list of people who had been accepted for training, the instructor reached number 274. The guard in red stopped near the cage where Yang was and demanded that he respond more quickly, thinking maliciously that he was counting flies. Without taking his eyes off the list of people in the squad, the instructor repeated the name of the prisoner in the barred cell and his serial number. Standing carelessly with his back to the bars, the instructor on duty did not see long arms with large thumbs reaching out to him from the dark depths of the cell. Holding the immobilized instructor, Yang announced the start of the escape operation with the participation of Roman and 2 other recruits. Since a new shift of instructors was about to arrive, the 274th recruit ordered his colleagues to hide the body of the instructor on duty somewhere. The instructors Todd and Jake, who were nearby, quickly understood the instruction and immediately took hold of the instructor who needed to be hidden. Roman, remembering his comrade's order, brought 2 more guys to them, and even though Jan didn't know if they could be trusted, his comrade assured him of the newbies' loyalty. Leaving the room, Roman asked if his friend was going to use the newbies as bait, because if so, he wouldn't be able to take them with him. Todd and Jake asked him not to worry, that they would never be caught, that they too could die here. Yan understood everything, but if they were heard, there would be problems. John, the recruit leading the procession, was completely serious as he asked all his companions to look ahead. The 4 of them approached the closed doors, and it was from behind them that the young recruit called out to all his comrades who had decided to flee. Standing in front of the doors, Jan told the guys that it was impossible to open them alone, which is why all these helpers were now necessary for the young man. According to a peculiar plan, in order to leave the dormitory and get to the toilet, the group needed to open these double doors. But in order to open them successfully, the escapees needed to step on 2 extremely important steps inside. When the doors through which the 4 guys must pass are activated, one of them must hold down the switch. As part of the next stage of the escape operation from the fortress walls, 2 other recruits must enter inside. Their next task is to press the switch on the outside of the doors so that the others can pass through. Jan knew he couldn't escape alone, and Roman was already asking Jake if he was ready, promising to give the signal and help at the same time. Pressing their feet on the squares on the floor, the participants in the rescue mission tried to get the doors to open. The first few seconds passed, but the exit doors remained closed to the 4 guys. But very soon, those who wanted to gain their long-awaited freedom succeeded, and the tall doors of the room finally opened. Moving forward, Yang called Todd to come with him, leaving Roman and Jake at the switch. But the senior wanted to know how long they had to stand there. Confident recruit 974 did not turn back to his companions and promised to give them a signal. Recruit Yang left, and the entrances to the rooms where everyone else was supposed to enter remained deserted and dark. which worried the three remaining recruits. Roman looked ahead and was visibly nervous because so much time had passed. But there was no signal from Yang, and this greatly worried the senior recruit. The silence continued for some time, and the darkness that emanated from it frightened the trio, who were eager to gain their long-awaited freedom. But in the next second, the doors suddenly slammed shut with a bang, much to the bitter disappointment of the unfortunate Roman. The recruit slammed his large fist against the red door and spoke insultingly about his comrade Yan. Hitting the door with both hands, the angry recruit Roman suggested that Yan had wanted to abandon his comrades from the very beginning. Remembering his comrade's appearance, Roman cursed and thought about his mistake, that he should have understood everything back then when John volunteered to go first. The man's sad thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a familiar voice, and it was Yan calling Roman to follow him. Peering through the gap between the two gate leaves, Roman came to the conclusion that he had only heard the voice of his comrade Yan. On the other side, the shadow of the 274th recruit appeared, reminding Roman how he had asked him to wait, but he had been unable to do so. Suddenly, the doors opened, and the stern Yan appeared before the three recruits, having heard his comrade's words that he had abandoned them all. Since there was blood on Yan, this aroused the suspicion of his colleagues, and they began to ask where it came from, remembering Todd. Stepping forward, Yan asked the guys to stay calm, saying that someone had cursed him recently, and he was a little late, and something had gone wrong, much to Roman's surprise. The junior recruit thought he would just add a sleeping pill to the bait, but it didn't work, which surprised his senior comrade Roman again. As they moved forward, the guys saw a great wolf lying in the field with its mouth open and large fangs. The beast caused Yan some trouble, and he needed more time, but he didn't listen to Roman, who was surprised by the size of the predator, and suggested moving forward. After a certain amount of time, the trio of escapees came to an abandoned toilet building, and so far everything was going according to plan. Thanks to the crack made by Yan in the abandoned toilet, the fugitives were able to see the surroundings outside the training camp. It was already evening, the sun had set, and the surroundings were completely deserted, with the tops of the trees covered in the darkness of night. The only changes were on the surface of the earth, and in some places, the ground seemed to stir. A split second later, a human hand appeared from under the ground, reaching upward, and the fugitives let out a loud cry. Yang, who had jumped out first, looked around and wondered if they had come out in the right direction, while Roman asked Todd and Jake to pull him out quickly. Yang climbed to the top of the hill and began to look around, but saw no signs of anyone following them, although the instructors could find out about the escape and pursue them. Roman approached his comrade, who was looking at the starry sky, feeling uneasy about the extremely quick escape. The 274th recruit couldn't take his eyes off the beautiful landscape and disagreed with his comrade, because a lot of time had passed. As if spellbound, he continued to watch the stars and told his companion about the enormous amount of time that had passed since their escape. There was a majestic forest and mountains here, and Yan thought about how long it had been since he had breathed air outside the training ground. The three companions were behind Yang, and Roman asked him if everything would be over if they left. The guy asked them not to relax, as this was only the beginning. Looking around with a special gaze, the young recruit was completely confident that this was only the beginning of everything. Remembering the pendant he had found earlier, Yan took it out and looked at it, but did not open it yet. Then he opened something important to him and saw the same image of himself and his family, thinking about the journey that would bring back the past. Their journey was beginning right now, but there was no time, and Yang decided to explain everything once and for all, asking his comrades to listen to him carefully. Those who had fled for freedom found themselves in the vast Atrian forest, covered with redwoods, which are often found in the mountainous regions of the north of the empire. Showing the plan with toys, Yang pointed to the guy's location in the center of the forest and said they could get out of it in 2 days, although Roman suggested hiding there. According to the senior recruit, the sequoia is a tall tree and suitable for rescue, and his comrade agreed with him, but reminded him of the presence of monsters. The young man was also sure that the organization was already looking for them, and it was only a matter of time before they were caught in the dense forest. The pursuit squad consists of about 20 people, and if the punitive group manages to find the guys, it will be the end of them. The young man has only one way to increase the team's chances of success, which is to split up so that the squad disperses. If the group splits up, the pursuers will have to divide themselves, and each will be able to take out 5 enemies, thus increasing the chances of escape. The dissatisfied Roman considers himself bait in this case, because the punitive squad will go after him first, as he is the highest-ranking recruit in the organization. Yan looked at his comrade and, agreeing with him, stated the need to be cautious, because no one wants to be bait. The assistants exchanged frightened glances as Yang assured them that death awaited them if they stayed together, calling the new tactic a necessity. After once again looking searchingly at his companions, the 974th recruit suggested that they scatter in different directions and waited for questions from his colleagues. Yan's actions did not go unnoticed by his omniscient comrade Roman, who now did not understand one thing. He pointed to the game board lying on the grass, which had become their escape plan, and pointed to the number written on each piece. A disappointed Roman wondered why only his piece had such an unpleasant inscription. The stars continued to burn, and Yan, seeing that his companions had no questions, suggested they move on, which did not please Roman, who had not heard the answer to his question. The senior recruit thanked his comrade with discontent, who listened to him silently, glancing in his direction. One of the assistants who had escaped with them noted the role of Yan, without whom they would not have been able to get out of the detachment, which they considered hell. Taking off his hood, the blonde-haired guy with an empty left eye promised to repay Yan and hoped that he would recognize him when they met again. Jan looked seriously at this chance companion, remembering that the young man's name was Jake and that he had treated him like a simple recruit. The guy had an expressionless face, and Yan believed he must have a reason to risk his own life like this. Roman joined the conversation, asking him not to joke around because he had no plans to meet up with the guys again. But the leader of the escape group was surprised by this. Yang called his senior comrade a good captain, but such a callous person that it caused disappointment in the 12th recruit. Being sure that there would be nothing to talk about if they met again later, Roman suggested that the guys get out of there without any problems. Opening his big eyes at moments like this, Yan felt like an old man and considered his older comrade a degenerate, which surprised him. The guys who had bet on liberation and the desire to be free came to the conclusion that their comrade Roman was right now. Gathering in a circle, as if to take a kind of oath, the guys listened to Yan, who suggested that they should not meet again. Soon the clearing was empty, the escapees had disappeared, and Yan rushed forward with all his might, pushing his way through the thick forest. He ran forward, thinking that his comrades in the rescue operation were also rushing at full speed toward freedom. With determination in his eyes, the young man strode forward toward the free life he hoped for. To achieve his goals, the young man decided to use the divine breath of the dragon. This renewed skill even affected Yan's limbs, which were distinguished by their speed, with which he moved through the forest. The next step in increasing his speed was to use the ability of the wings of the windbird. Golden traces of the young man's lightning-fast movement remained on the sequoia tree he had climbed. From the top of the tall tree, Yang watched the beauty of the evening forest and the glowing lights within it. Yang's body was actually a problem, and it was difficult for him to even breathe evenly in this situation. He managed to compensate for the problem with his torso, which had defective blood vessels through which mana flowed using technical techniques. This peculiar character understood perfectly well that he could expect nothing from small children. Still standing there in his dirty clothes after some serious fighting, the young guy thought he was just as pathetic as they were. As the commander of the 5th Group of the Special Forces Unit, god of persecution, murder, and espionage, he was interested in her level, and he would find out. People walked up the steps of the fortress and discussed the lack of news from their pursuers, who had been gone for a long time, because the fugitives had to be caught quickly. The mentors in red uniforms walking down the corridor hoped for the quickest possible capture of the fugitives before the return of the crazy instructor from the palace. The very same crazy instructor who had returned put his hands on the shoulders of the unsuspecting guard, and now the guys were in trouble. The terrified instructor glanced at his boss out of the corner of his eye and muttered with a tremor in his voice that he didn't mean to say that. Chief Instructor Damien's feigned cheerfulness quickly disappeared, and he glared at the offender among his subordinates. Then Damien smiled his smile, which usually did not bode well for those in front of him. He tried to pat the recruit instructor on the shoulder, urging him to breathe calmly and assuring him that everything was fine and that anything could happen. Passing by the columns, the instructor continued to apologize, explaining that he had misspoken, and Damien reminded the man of his words about wanting to see the Emperor's wrath. The silent instructor was stopped by the guards, and Damien led the culprit away and questioned him about the roll call of recruits, considering that it had been difficult for him. The instructor who had offended his superior asked him not to worry, because the pursuit squad would soon catch the fugitives. With a smile that lacked kindness, Damien asked how this would be done. The subordinate turned to the chief instructor of the organization, not understanding his simple question. This time, Damien looked at his employee with truly evil eyes, their pupils burning with madness and horror. And suddenly, in the next moment, the chief instructor abruptly placed his left hand on the shoulder of the unsuspecting mentor. As a result of the leader's terrifying movement, the mentor in the red uniform fell down with his legs twisted in different directions. The unfortunate man, having fallen down, writhed in pain in his own legs, while the heartless Damien reproached him for not anticipating the recruit's escape. The guards in white heard their boss accuse his subordinates of not noticing the digging of the passage and the theft of supplies for the escape by the fugitives. The injured instructor raised his tormented gaze and asked the chief instructor to give them another chance. The angry leader of the organization responded by stomping on his unfortunate subordinate with his boot, causing him pain. With a cold and insensitive expression on his face, Damien pointed out to the employees that they had lost all their opportunities in this job. Experiencing incredible pain from the chief instructor's blow, the mentor now asked only for salvation. It was no longer Damien looking at the unfortunate man, but as if his demonic essence had broken out, and he knew who was behind the poor mentor. Leaving the scene of his own crime, the chief instructor ordered the guard in white to tell the members of the pursuit squad to go to the chief. Red stains remained on the floor, and Damien promised to keep a close eye on everything from now on, especially the recruits. Recalling the cohort of new recruits, the chief instructor of the ruthless organization knew some very interesting guys, and now he couldn't wait to deal with them. Fog continued to reign in the Atrian forest, covering an increasingly large area of the forest, helping the escaped boys. A pursuit squadron numbered 3 was already actively operating in the forest, searching for the 4 deserters. Wearing sturdy boots, the pursuers quickly cut through the terrain, leaving only crushed grass behind them. Like all other members of the organization, these men also wore the organization's signature red masks over their faces. The leader of the squad, who was running ahead, suddenly raised his left hand and ordered his 2 subordinates to stop immediately. The trio of pursuers stopped moving and stood near a large tree, the younger ones assuming that the fugitives' tracks had disappeared in the forest. Removing his red mask, the leader of the group denied that there were any problems, saying that the chase was going quite smoothly. The commander of Pursuit Squad number 3, Kelly, asked his men if they found it strange that the search operation was going so smoothly. Team member Chael believes that everything is going smoothly because they are dealing with number 974, but Andre thinks that the boss has his suspicions. They were following the tracks in this direction, but some tracks point to another route here. The squad leader noticed a piece of cloth hanging on a short branch and understood the fugitives' desire to escape as quickly as possible. According to Chael and Andre, because of this suspicion, their leader had no time for anything else, not even his girlfriend, which made him unhappy. Kelly looked ahead warily, overcome with anxiety, but it could have been just a premonition. The unpleasant feeling did not leave the guy, but he did not see the barely noticeable thin light threads stretching along the entire length. The guys continued to stand next to the large tree, trying to figure out the situation, while the fog rose higher and higher. Kelly's next order was to capture Jan before he took advantage of the situation and hid even further away, and his subordinates immediately accepted it. According to Chael, they only needed to catch Jan, so everything should be simple, but Roman would cause trouble. Andre considered him a simple recruit, albeit one with the number 12. Asking his comrade about his recruit, Andre did not notice a man in blue clothes with burning eyes appear behind him. Before the member of the pursuit group could finish his sentence, he was seized and dragged upstairs. The leaves of the huge tree rustled, as if trying to say something in their own language about the only 2 people who remained below. His partner looked at Andre in surprise and was about to ask for the recruit's number, but he didn't see his comrade in front of him. Trying to find Andre with his eyes, Chael did not see a male silhouette appear from behind a tree with a sharp knife in his hands. The thick fog spreading through the forest and the tall trees became silent witnesses to the disappearance of 2 members of the search party. The mysterious man who skillfully eliminated his opponents knew that only one of his rivals remained. Dissatisfied with his noisy subordinates, Kelly thought they were on a picnic because all the deserters would just run away from the voices of the guys. The squad leader turned around and began calling out the names of his own colleagues who had disappeared in a minute. 2 people had disappeared without a trace in the forest clearing, and could something really have happened here in such a short time? New bright and long nets appeared, indicating something terrible, so the premonition did not deceive one of the characters in the action. Left alone after the disappearance of his subordinates, Chael and Andre Kelly did not want to think about it, even though there was a 12th recruit here, but he would not be able to defeat the instructor. Remembering the recruit numbered 974, the leader of the pursuit team did not notice someone's hand reaching out to him. A bright, thin thread suddenly appeared and cut through the silent space to defeat the third character in the forest. Kelly jumped up, the female and male principals returned, and a powerful spinning kick was delivered. With the next deft movement, the leader of the squad chopped down a thick tree trunk in front of him. With his face contorted with rage, the guy looked ahead and spoke harshly about the invisible enemy who thought his actions would work a third time. But in the next moment, the unknown figure threw a rope around the neck of Kelly, who was fighting for his life, dropping his blade and trying to get rid of the noose. The deadly rope was stretched across a thick tree branch, and the unfortunate leader of the pursuit team continued to scream in pain. The young fighter sent by the organization's instructors felt extremely uncomfortable, but it was already impossible to save the poor man. He remembered the footprints left on the damp ground and the scrap of clothing on the branch, all left there by strangers and not by accident. The man, unseen by his pursuers, had set this trap, prepared specifically for the search party. Still clutching his neck, Kelly still couldn't believe how he and his comrades could have fallen at the hands of number 974. Holding the terrifying rope aloft, Yang heard his rival's words about the impossibility of defeating the pursuit squad. Unable to complete the task of capturing the escaped recruits, Kelly moved his legs and called out to his subordinates. All this lasted for a short time, but then the unfortunate guy fell silent, and the third pursuit squad ceased to exist. The white fog continued its quiet expansion of the forest, covering more and more territory with every passing second. The sharp blade dropped by Kelly, the leader of the pursuit group, caught the eye of recruit Yan, who decided to make use of it. Yan knew it would be difficult, but not that difficult. If he could master the technique, then he would be able to fight without any problems. The stern and determined look on the face of the young man, who wanted to be free, showed his intention to get out of the forest before the fog cleared. Looking around, Jan noticed a nearby tree, which, like everything else around it, was covered in the blood of his pursuers. The red liquid was everywhere, and the hunting dogs would still smell it and come here for the fugitives. The guy decided to hide his own scent with silamo grass, because it would be easier for him to escape that way. Jan was well aware of the poisonous nature of this plant's fruits, and its green leaves had an unpleasant smell. In order to improve his concealment, the escaped recruit plans to chop up the silamo grass and apply it to every part of his body. Even dogs hate the smell of the plant, so they won't be able to smell Jan's presence in the forest, which means they won't find him. Now Jan needs to hurry because it is getting harder and harder, and if it gets lighter, even with the help of the net, it will be impossible to hide. Suddenly, the young man noticed something unusual in the surrounding area and looked ahead suspiciously. In the distance, mysterious black smoke rose high into the dark sky, as if something had caught fire. Climbing onto a high branch, Jan saw the foolish Jake and Todd ahead of him, who had decided to set up camp because their pursuers would not have started a fire. A new thought occurred to the escaped recruit as he continued to watch the smoke in the distance. No, it was none of his business. The guys were just bait anyway, and if they attracted attention, it would only play into the young man's hands. A scene appeared in his memory when, before parting in the forest, they stood in a circle and promised each other never to meet again. Forgetting his principles regarding his recent companions, Yang jumped out of the tree at lightning speed and ran towards those fools. The young man, who was stubbornly striving forward toward the black smoke, understood the necessity and benefit for himself that the other deserters remain alive. The young man's powerful legs seemed to be electrified. He had to get the guys away before their pursuers found them. A chill ran through John's body, who had made such a sharp start, and at that moment he sensed something behind him. Stopping in his tracks, the young man immediately realized that it was similar to the feeling of death in countless battles. Finally realizing that someone was behind him, watching him at the last moment, Jan felt the touch of a huge snake. The giant predator opened its huge mouth, and it seemed that the future of the unfortunate fugitive was already sealed. But when someone said they were glad Yang had been caught, the guy's eyes widened in surprise because he hadn't expected that. While the guy was looking at the butterfly, someone continued to say that he immediately perceived Yang as an interesting character when he first saw him. Sitting on the green grass, the little yellow butterfly fluttered its wings, and the stranger, as if upset, said that Yan had not revealed himself. During the strange monologue, the young man who had run away felt a strong typhoon and looked back. Behind him was not a small snake, but the smiling chief instructor Damien, whose eyes never deceive. He hadn't seen the 974th recruit in a long time, and the recruit in turn didn't know why his mentor had come here. Yan continued to stare with his violet eyes at Damien, who had appeared out of nowhere, trusting neither him nor his words. The black smoke in the forest disappeared, and in its place, a strange phenomenon resembling lightning appeared in the dark sky. The fugitive recruit John and the chief instructor of the detachment, Damien, who did not think that the guys would be able to pull off such a stunt, continued to stand in the forest glade. The young man continued to stare intently at his opponent, dreaming of escaping from him, thinking that this should not have happened. Yang was lost in conjecture, unable to understand how this was possible and how the chief instructor had ended up here in front of the young man. Before the escape, the young man was confident that his mentor would return to the squad later than scheduled. Yen had also heard about Damien causing riots in the Imperial Palace, as a result of which he was imprisoned, so his presence here was strange. Another thought struck the freedom-seeking young man. He had significantly changed the future of this world. A scene from his meeting with the 12th recruit, Roman, came to Jan's mind. Could his own actions have changed the future? If so, how? Recalling his meeting with Lorena Beowulf, Roman again, and the other recruits, Jan came to the conclusion that he had done nothing to influence the instructor. In the young man's opinion, his actions had caused cracks to appear that were different from those he had seen before. As a result of all this, the predestined future of this world was spectacularly destroyed. Jan was interrupted from his thoughts by the chief instructor, Damien, who wanted to know whether his opponent would now throw a mole or a mouse, hinting at the previous time. The disappointed young man could only conclude that the rescue mission had failed, as he had expected, and they had been caught. They remembered the mole that had once been near the 12th recruit, and Damien reproached Jan for running away, as if they thought he wouldn't catch them. But the chief instructor was surprised that the new recruit had let the mole escape so easily in front of the 12th recruit. At that moment, the cadet's reaction speed impressed Damien's mentor, who was watching what was happening from above. It was precisely because of his desire to find out what had happened that the head of the organization quickly returned to duty. Remembering Roman lying on the ground after colliding with the mole, Damien assumed that this place was only necessary for cockroaches. The other recruits who silently watched the events unfold were also witnesses to this incident. Among the guys was the 974th recruit, Jan, who kept his eyes on the chief instructor and Roman. Even then, Damien realized that there was a funny guy among all the recruits present. Continuing to look at the man in front of him, Yang thought about what had just happened to him. It was foolish of him. He didn't know how much the future had changed, but now everything had turned out for the worst. Although nothing was certain yet, and the instructor himself was the man who would later be called the Three Swords of the Continent. Yang's large eyes burned brightly, as if he were about to rush into battle to defeat the enemy who had caught up with him. Chief Instructor Damien remained calm and continued to smile, finding it all very entertaining. The young man looked at his dangerous opponent with the same suspicion, who was now laughing openly. Clapping his hands, Instructor Damien remained in a cheerful mood, finding certain events related to him and the recruit to be wonderful. It had been a long time since he had met daredevils who thought about how to kill him, so now the instructor asked him to tell him about the method of murder. Thinking that the recruits would try to escape into the forest, Damien was now speechless, finding the whole situation very funny. Covering his eyes with his hands, the chief instructor of the Special Forces unit playfully apologized to Jan because he simply did not understand right away. But the squad leader has no intention of stopping there. He agrees to give the escaped recruit a chance. In an instant, Damien's face became as serious as possible, his previous smile disappeared, and he suggested that Jan kill the instructor, after which the guy would receive his desired freedom. Surprised by such an unexpected proposal, the young man looked at the head of the organization in amazement, not knowing how to respond. The head instructor was once again a kind and pleasant man, and he pointed out the change in Jan's gaze after those words were spoken. Damien had never met such guys in his life before, and this low-level recruit managed to destroy a demonic beast. He also managed to neutralize all the members of the pursuit squad who had been sent after the recruits. Prudence, courage, endurance, and calculation are character traits that do not correspond to the level of trash, and the guy tied up his seekers. According to Damien, Yang seems to have been born for the special forces, which the true elite have the honor of serving. If the guy continued to develop under the guidance of experienced instructors, he would risk becoming a real monster of combat. Armed with vast knowledge and experience, equipped with a demonic red mask, and with burning eyes, Yang would have no equal in battle. Listening attentively to Demina, Yang at first remained silent, nervous and not knowing what to say in response to such a proposal. Something unusual began to happen to him, and the poor guy's knees immediately began to buckle. Unexpectedly, the young man who had recently dreamed of personal freedom collapsed to the ground and was ready to show his abilities, begging for mercy. Yang remained on his knees waiting for the chief instructor's response, while the latter looked at his subordinate with surprise. Damien, who did not expect such a turn of events, did not immediately find what to say to the man who had run away from the squad. Crying in front of Damien, John asked him if he was really an instructor, saying that the guy just couldn't see well and didn't even know who was standing in front of him. The guy had no intention of running away. They dragged him out and promised not to leave him alone until he did what the others wanted. And when they abandoned the young man, the instructor suddenly appeared. Evening came while they were talking, and Damien asked if John had really been forced, and he confirmed it. The young man blamed everything on the 12th recruit, who cursed the chief instructor every day with the worst words. Closing his eyes, Damien continued to listen to the fugitive cadet's words. But did he really think he could deceive his superior so easily? The 974th recruit was so surprised that his eyes nearly popped out of his head when he heard this. To make himself look more credible, Yang burst into bitter tears and tried to beg the chief instructor further. Remaining extremely calm, the chief instructor Damien kept his eyes on the member of the Special Forces unit. The leader of the organization waved his hands sharply, and a bright light appeared before them. He did not understand Yang's actions, who was doing everything so strangely. Damien held a pointed object with a handle in his hands and thought that Yan had simply decided to lower his guard. But it was so primitive. Looking at the device with feigned admiration, the chief instructor of the squad was disappointed. Quite unexpectedly, in the next moment, the tip of the tool was right next to the mentor's eye. Just as suddenly, the deadly little weapon flew past Damien's head, saving his life. The dagger's flight was not entirely safe for Damien. Thrown surreptitiously, as it seemed to him, by Yan, the knife left 2 scratches on his face. But in reality, he expected to see something like this from his protege, who had not only managed to escape from the camp, but also to throw blades. Looking ahead, Damien saw that Jan was gone. He had disappeared, which was his desired goal. Jan, who was flying above the chief instructor, who seemed unaware of all this, had a very real goal. The chief instructor stopped smiling, looked back with intense irritation, and glared at the insolent young man. Jan's eyes burned with determination to defeat his enemy, and the process of reflection and shadows of 15 was already underway. Everything happened quite quickly. The recruit seemed to strike a powerful blow against his strong opponent, but the latter masterfully parried the attack. The battle with his powerful opponent began to take its toll immediately, as Jan's leg was injured and bleeding. The guy looked ahead and did not see Damien's distinct silhouette, so he assumed he was using black fog. With his large eye, which was closely watching what was happening, Jan saw the fog moving quickly in his direction. More reminiscent of a terrible black tornado, this creature seemed to sweep away everything in its path and rush straight at the guy. The fog and bright light seemed to merge into one, with the aim of capturing the brave Yang and engulfing him in its deadly environment. The young man, who remained calm, kept his eyes on the dangerous element as it continued to pursue him, leaving him no escape. Then Yan took out his sharp blade to continue the battle with his powerful enemy, whom he hoped to defeat. The young man's touch on this weapon caused the blade to glow, and now he was ready to engage his opponent in combat. The young man used a secret technique involving the 5 senses, and a bright light appeared, which could work in favor of the brave fighter. Building a web of light to defend himself against Chief Instructor Damien, the escaped recruit Yang performed a quick swallow throw. The brave young man's dagger could not withstand such heavy work and broke, much to the disappointment of its owner. The black mist began to shrink in size and settle not far from Yang, and Damien reminded him in a human voice of his promise to let the boy go if he won. While returning to his usual appearance, the chief instructor of the Special Forces decided to take back his promise. Emerging from the magical mist, Damien looked at the young man and was no longer going to let such an interesting guy go. He praised John and allowed him to play games with him, because that way he would never be bored. Keeping his eyes on his experienced and strong opponent, the 974th recruit thought that he looked as if he had been bitten by a rabid dog. Suddenly, the young man's eyes fixed on a single point. He saw something unusual and at the same time painfully familiar. On the right side of the neck and chest of the chief instructor, Damien, Yang noticed a pattern that he had seen before in an image. 22 hours before the escape, Yang was in his cell, and torches burned brightly in the corridor, illuminating the room. In the dormitory for junior recruits of the Donhell Special Forces Unit, the standard roll call had ended and the officer on duty had given the all clear. Having finished preparing for his escape, Yang sat on his bunk and thought about today as his last day here. He wanted to escape and return to his family, but the young man knew nothing about his relatives, and the only clue the unfortunate youth had was an old pendant in his hands. Looking at the image of a boy surrounded by a man and a woman, Yang promised himself that he would find them and live a normal life. Before he had time to think about his dream, the boy noticed something that had happened to the object that was so precious to him. Part of the pendant cracked and crumbled, even though it was his only clue. But inside, the young man noticed something strange. Inside the damaged part of the pendant he had found, there was a pattern that visibly excited the young recruit. Looking closely at the fragment he had found, the soldier came to the conclusion that it was the coat of arms of his own family. Yang noticed the engraving of a mysterious pattern on the inside of the object, but he did not understand the reason for it, which meant there was a reason to hide it. At least something was becoming clear to the recruit, because if a family had its own coat of arms, it meant that they no longer belonged to the lower class or were slaves. If the young man found someone who knew something about this pattern, then he would be able to find his relatives. That's what the 974th recruit thought before, but now he sees a similar pattern on the body of his chief instructor, Damien. The coat of arms of recruit John's family is drawn on the powerful neck and chest of the leader of the Special Forces instructors, and this strikes him. Taking off his outer clothing, Damien headed towards John, who stopped and, as the instructor thought, gave up. But the guy was only thinking about the pattern. The boy couldn't believe that the instructor could be a member of his family, and the latter was upset by his opponent's lack of reaction, because the fun was in full swing. With a smile on his face, Mr. Damien approached his opponent and said that he would die right now. The response from the escaped recruit Jan was a powerful blow that nearly blinded the chief instructor and threw him back. Despite the good attack, the experienced and equally strong mentor held his ground, and Jan thought he might have missed his enemy. Smiling, Damien waved his left hand and noted the power of the blow, wondering where his young opponent had learned his techniques. Wanting to show the new recruit something too, the chief instructor used his magical abilities to summon black and red tentacles from the ground. A moment later, the magical masses burst forth in full force. Yang recognized them as a shadow sword and a black dagger. The terrifying magical weapons began to attack the young man, but he skillfully dodged them, evading the dangerous blows. During his next jump, Yang was caught, and the shadow dagger pierced his pants but did not cause significant damage. The black magic swords flew relentlessly past the young warrior, who did not want to die in battle with his chief instructor. Landing on the ground, the 974th recruit realized that Damien was just having fun. Otherwise, he would never have been able to withstand the attack of the black dagger. When Damien was less vigilant, Yang would try to escape, but then he would not find out why there was a pattern on his boss's body, so he had to find out everything. The leader might be related to the guy's family. Soon, the Armenian rebellion would begin on the continent, provoking the destruction of 10 kingdoms and the elimination of the aristocracy, putting the imperial family in danger. But the ruler of this country will be able to suppress this huge uprising thanks to his great sword. Destroying the enemies of the state, he had to not only execute the instigators of the rebellion and their relatives, but also incinerate all of his other rivals. The fire, which burned for almost a month, was called the 20-day sunset, and the main instigator of the uprising turned out to be the bastard son of the previous emperor. There were many rumors about the reasons for the failed revolution, but no one ever learned the truth because all records of those events were destroyed by fire. The man without whom nothing terrible would have happened in the country, without whom the Armenian uprising would never have taken place, was executed in a terrible way. But all those who remembered the rebel called him the Three Swords of the Continent, although he was better known as the chief instructor at the training center for special forces. Approaching Jan, Damien noticed that the young man was not with his main mentor. He seemed to be deep in thought. If Jan's family was connected to the Armenian rebellion, then his relatives could die in the coming uprising, so the brave recruit needed to keep this a secret. Deciding to postpone his escape plan, Jan intends to stay at the center and gain the instructor's trust, who must believe that Yan is necessary for him. The young man looked at the chief instructor standing in front of him and remembered something that would help him carry out his plan. It had grown quite dark in the forest while the battle was going on, and Yang praised the chief instructor's skill and did not expect him to chase after him. Damien was very pleased to hear this, as well as what his protege said about the leader of the special unit, who was grateful for his hard work. Just as he was about to say how much he appreciated it, Yang was suddenly interrupted by the instructor, who covered the young man's mouth and face with his hand. Then in a fit of rage, he threw the 974th recruit away with a powerful blow. The unfortunate recruit flew toward a large, sturdy tree, while the vindictive Damien recalled what he considered to be a funny joke. Against the backdrop of the dark forest, an otherworldly glow appeared, reaching the tops of the tall trees. After a powerful blow from senior instructor Damien, Yang fell with a cry onto a pile of trees and hung his head. Approaching the unfortunate young man and grabbing him by his clothes, the squad leader told him how he thought he was a fine fellow, but the young man clearly did not know how to watch his tongue. Lifting Yan up, Damien wants to know if this is how he intends to end his life. But the guy insists that his cheeky tongue is sometimes capable of saying useful things. But now the young man's rival wants to see if what Yan said is true. Still hanging on the fist of his powerful enemy, the young man reveals his understanding of the captain's weakness, which will help kill him. The words spoken by the guy who escaped from the camp caused noticeable confusion in the chief instructor of the detachment, as how could he know about this? Lifting his head with a cheeky smile, Jan mentioned the county of Simons and the number 52. The young man was well aware of his opponent's vulnerability, and the latter was struck by his rival's knowledge. Several hours passed after their confrontation in the forest, and events began to unfold again at the training center. This large corridor with tall columns was well known to the 974th recruit and his comrades. The man put a gray glove on his left hand with the feeling that it did not fit him properly. After his adventures in the forest, Damien complained that his new clothes were a little too small for him, but he didn't want to ruin his favorite uniform. Humbly lowering his gaze and closing his eyes, the chief instructor of the Special Forces unit came to the conclusion that there was nothing to be done. His assistant, who was descending the stairs with him, wanted to mention the location of the other fugitives, but Damien ordered them to be thrown into the mass grave. The assistant accepted the order of his boss, who, by his own admission, had no intention of worrying about some bugs. With a look of dissatisfaction on his face, Damien, the chief instructor of the center, wanted to remind them of another order, but did not have time to finish. In front of him, he saw a man with a cane standing in the shadows, who thought Damien was pretending to be busier than everyone else. Clearly feeling his own superiority over the chief instructor, the man demanded that he look at himself now. Frowning, Damien looked at this important person, who called him junior in rank and pointed out the instructor's abundance of free time. He was a stately, military-bearing older man who called Damien lazy and demanded an explanation from him. Bowing his head slightly, the accused asked this man what business he had come on without warning. Before Damien stood the stern, blue-eyed Rodrigo Mayer, captain of the first-rank Special Forces. Sitting on one of the floors of the huge building, they talked, and Captain Mayer asked him to tell him how the training had been going lately. Chief Instructor Damien claimed that the men were working hard, but Rodrigo Mayer did not believe his subordinate because he had heard something completely different. Yan's recent opponent had heard about the superiority of the center's cadets over the skills of the squad members, but the captain of the organization did not believe it. Looking at his colleague with a piercing gaze, Mayer believes that the center's graduates have tremendous abilities. Damien does not believe that the members of the squad are to blame, suggesting that the person in charge of them within the organization should be punished. Not at all angered by this verbal attack, Captain Rodrigo Mayer thanked his colleague for his advice and promised to take it into account. A guard in a white uniform standing behind the senior commanders noticed Mana vibrating in the air. There was indeed some strange movement near one of the columns of the large building. According to the guard in a red mask with fangs, this was incredible, because usually untrained people would lose consciousness. Damien closed his eyes when Captain Rodrigo Mayer mentioned how the chief instructor had not appeared at the palace by imperial decree. The senior colleague assured the mentor that he had more important things to do and did not want to waste time on pretentious meetings, which surprised the captain. The royal palace appeared before his eyes, and Rodrigo Mayer did not understand what could be more important than carrying out the decree of His Majesty the Emperor. Mayer began to speak, making assumptions about his subordinates' actions, but then paused for a moment. With all his attention, Chief Instructor Damien looked questioningly at his boss, not knowing what he was thinking. Opening his eyes in surprise, the mentor heard Mayer mention his blue blood flowing through his veins, capable of helping him survive. Damien did not show up for the appointment because the cadets had escaped from the center, and it would be bad if he couldn't even deal with them. After first asking the chief instructor not to worry, the captain didn't finish his sentence. Damien interrupted him, and Mayer simply misunderstood everything. Deciding to leave his boss, Jan's recent opponent went straight ahead and began to deny the existence of any escapees. Captain Rodrigo doesn't believe it because he heard something, but Damien denies it because the elderly man clearly has hearing problems due to his age. Explaining that the cadets had gone outside with their instructors to prepare for the exam, the head instructor pointed out the appearance of cockroaches, which surprised Mayer. Remembering his unfortunate subordinate, Damien compared him to a bug that he would crush with his boot if he saw it in the center. But this irritates the chief instructor so much that no matter how many insects he eliminates, they continue to crawl forward. The captain of the Special Forces unit just listened silently and didn't say a word to his subordinate. Now Damien thinks he has found the cockroach nest, so he will be able to destroy all the larvae. After that, the chief instructor of the squad wished Captain Rodrigo Mayer a safe journey and announced that it was time to leave. Damien thinks he has managed to calm his feelings at the sight of the captain's confused look, and that it is time for the old man to start organizing his own funeral. Behind the chief instructor walked a guard in a white uniform, and the participant in the battle with Jan wanted to ask him something. Now he is interested in what the assistant said, because it may all be 100% true. Taking off his red mask, the assistant asks his boss not to worry, as he is not deceiving his allies, and Damien will soon be able to see this for himself. The chief instructor turned back suspiciously, glancing at the guard as if he did not believe his words. Looking at his boss with great confidence, the assistant declared that all the information he had provided was true. The abandoned street at number 592, located in Simons County, is shown. It was here that a boy once lived in one of the sturdy and well-built large houses. A child's cry was heard near one of these rooms, but the area was deserted and completely silent. In a place where there were almost no people, a boy stood and insisted that the window be open, saying he wanted to show something interesting. He stood in front of the house and looked up at the attic window, talking about catching a big rat, calling it a cutie that was worth seeing. This street was not suitable for children to live on, but this was where the boy was, asking for the window to be opened, not sure if the person he needed was at home. But the window still did not open, so the boy began to doubt that the owners of the house were home. Soon a voice was heard from the window. Someone called the boy a fool, and he just stared silently at the house. The person the boy was calling didn't understand why anyone would want to look at a rat, but no one opened the window. Finally, it opened slightly, and a little girl appeared who wanted to see a squirrel more than a rat. She was the daughter of the captain himself, and she lived in this abandoned place. Various papers lay on the desk, and there was a lamp for lighting, and a man was listening to the story. The boy told the man how he had been friends with the girl since childhood, and the man kept agreeing with him. In the chief instructor's office, Yang told Damien about the abandoned street where not many children lived, so they all knew each other. Listening to the recruit with his eyes closed, the mentor asked about the girl Jan played with as a child, and it turned out she was the captain's daughter. In the room with the window slightly open, the young recruit confirmed his own words, and for Damien himself, it was like luck. Young was sure that the chief instructor would not believe him, as it was too implausible a lie, but he had to make him do it. He already knew about the hostile relationship between the chief instructor and the captain of the special unit. Combing every inch of the county in search of the captain's weak spot, the instructor has so far been unsuccessful. Damien's reaction to the words of the 974th recruit proves this, so he needs to use this information. The mentor finds it strange that if Yang knows the whereabouts of the captain's daughter, why does he consider this to be Mayer's weak spot? Damien tries to assure the guy that he heard all this personally, but the chief instructor doesn't really believe it. Once, when Yang climbed onto the roof and sat near an open window, the girl said that she would soon leave, and this upset the boy. Bad people want to harm the girl's father, so they are looking for her to blackmail her, and her father thinks it is right to leave. A few days later, she disappeared, accompanied by people dressed in black, and when he got to the center, Yang recognized these people as soldiers from a special unit, and her father as their captain. The window in that big house remained closed and dark forever, and the pleasant girl's voice was never heard from there again. Listening to this fascinating story, the chief instructor rested his head on his right hand and smiled at the narrator. He found it incredible, and everything was turning out so well because his subordinate was friends with the daughter of the captain of the center himself. Then Yang learned about the tense relationship between Damien and Mayer, and that the instructor was looking for his weaknesses, and the young man knew about it, which was an amazing coincidence. Jan assumed that the head instructor was under the patronage of the goddess of luck, but Damien doesn't understand how he came to that conclusion. Suddenly, an unusually bright glow appeared near the recruit, and he stared at him with obvious suspicion. A dark pen was thrown at the office wall with such force that it caused cracks in the wall. The weapon grazed the young man, leaving a scratch on his face, and he looked at the chief instructor with alienation. Instead of considering it a lucky coincidence, Damien would rather position Yan as the captain's spy. It seemed more logical to him. The 274th recruit stared silently at his attacker for a moment, blood trickling down his face in a thin line. Then, with a cool movement, the new recruit wiped the red liquid from the injured spot on his face. For Yan, this line of thinking on the part of the chief instructor was natural, because such coincidences were truly incredible in this case. First, the young warrior found one piece, then he picked up the second, and so he continued to collect them for his survival here. The recruit's personal childhood memories gradually formed a complete picture of his existence. Then there was an addition in the form of an understanding of Captain Meyer's relationship with his family members. The guy also mentioned the hierarchy within the special unit, and even the feud between Mr. Rodrigo and the chief instructor Damien. Thinking about what information to keep for his own benefit, John put his memories and the information he had received together like a puzzle in his head for the sake of his own survival. Damien thinks Yang is the captain's spy, but the guy wouldn't risk his life to escape, and he kept the knowledge in case the rescue operation failed. Mixing truth with lies, the young man wanted the center's chief instructor to experience both disappointment and hope. And then, according to John's plan, the scales of faith in the heart of his current opponent would be balanced with the scales of doubt. Thanks to this narrative and his efforts, the young man hoped that faith would prevail in this case. This was not all the information for the chief instructor of the squad, so Jan continued his story. Damien stared intently at Yan, who also knows where the daughter of Special Forces Captain Mayer is now. Wanting to prove to the instructor that it is more profitable to trust the recruit, the guy hopes to tip the scales in his favor. Hearing such candor, the chief instructor rose from behind his desk, where various papers lay. Then Damien turned his back on John and walked over to the window, looking out into the darkness beyond the building, wanting to clarify something. The recruit kept his eyes on the chief instructor, but did not know if he had tipped the scales with his convictions. After Damien asked if the goddess of luck was really on his side, John came to the conclusion that everything had worked out for him. Responding positively to Damien's question, the guy compared himself to a lucky charm, but his boss told him to stop talking. Continuing the conversation by the window, the boss promised to turn a blind eye to today's events and asked Yang to return and keep his mouth shut. The guy realized that he had passed the test, but did not outwardly express his joy at this occasion. Damien didn't believe every word Yan said, but that was fine with him. He had no intention of rushing things. Apologizing, the young man expressed his hope that his mentor would be able to rest well, to which the latter agreed verbally. When Damien was left alone, he began to study the folder with the personal file of the departed guest, who had only the number 974. There were other documents on the desk, but the head mentor remembered his colleagues at the center and did not believe in their blindness. Closing his eyes, Damien immediately thought about the rating system, which could have failed, but then a completely unexpected thought came to his mind. Holding Jan's personal file, recruit 974 in his own hands, the mentor thought about his own. Damien smiled slyly. There was one important moment that interested him greatly. A week after the events described, it was time for the activities in the Blade Mountains. It was the Blade Mountain Range with its impenetrable forests and treacherous red swamps, where the first test for the cadets of the special unit began. The Emperor issued a decree prohibiting visits to this terrifying territory, which could only inspire fear in the citizens of the kingdom. Here, amid the unwelcoming local landscapes, dwell a wide variety of monsters. All these dangerous beasts have long made the ridge incredibly dangerous for the ordinary people who inhabit the country. Among the local terrifying creatures is the swamp goblin, whose appearance frightens even the most experienced warriors of the Empire. One of the center's recruits had to engage in open combat with this monster, striking it blow after blow. One of his well-aimed lunges was successful, and the swamp goblin felt his strength rapidly draining from his terrifying body. The cadet of the Special Forces unit, covered by two comrades, managed to eliminate the dangerous monster, which lay lifeless before them. While the victor breathed a sigh of relief, one of his comrades rejoiced, knowing that they would prevail, while the other assured him that there was nothing special on the ridge. Asking them to speak more quietly, the guys pointed out the possible presence of other monsters in the area, but the recruit was confident that the surroundings had been completely cleared of monsters. They remembered the instruction to stay in the mountains for a week to pass the exam, and at this rate, the students would definitely succeed. The cadet who had eliminated the swamp goblin turned around angrily and reminded his comrade of his request to be quieter. The latter understood and immediately apologized. The leader reminded him of the need to collect stones and mana in the Blade Mountains. But his comrade was so happy about the victory that he forgot about the other conditions for passing the test. If they managed to survive, the results would depend on the number of stones collected. But the mission participants also wanted to beat the cadets from the four great families. The talkative companions had to be silenced again by their leader, who urged his comrades to slow down. Talking about the need to remain vigilant so that their skills would be enough to win, the guy did not even notice the huge clawed fingers hanging over him. They grabbed the coughing recruit by the head, and he, the 320th recruit, dropped out of the mission to take the exam on the mountain ridge. With faces contorted with fear, two comrades watched the horrific events unfold and the death of their friend. Continuing to hold their weapons and shields, the recruits in the center tried to scare away the monster, not knowing where this giant beast had come from. The eyes of the terrifying creature looked in different directions, which only exacerbated the fear of the people on the sidelines. The unfortunate boy was held by the head by the great golden ogre, who possessed the magic of invisibility and was able to sneak up on his victim unnoticed. With its next move, the monster threw the cadet back onto the ground. With its huge paws, the great golden ogre began to destroy everything around it, continuing to make incomprehensible sounds. The poor recruits of the center could not resist the terrible monster, so numbers 345 and 347 were soon eliminated. The swamp-colored magic ball showed everything that was happening to the inexperienced students in the Mountains of Blades, where monsters roamed. Chief Instructor Damien, who was watching the unfortunate events unfolding for the boys in the dangerous area, just laughed and called them trash. Standing on a pedestal in front of the recruits, Damien mentioned the deaths of 30 boys and asked the rest to be more careful, as the instructors were tired of picking up their bodies. Demanding that the center's recruits get moving, the chief instructor announced that they would be sent to the warp gate every 5 minutes. A faint green light appeared in front of Damien's two assistants, but they accepted their master's order. Yang, who was among the other students in the squad and was not in the best condition, realized that he too would end up in those cursed places. The chief instructor was in a good mood, and he surely ordered his searchers to search the place that the guy had previously told him about. In the very house where Captain Meyer's daughter had previously lived, the detectives would be able to find some traces, but they would not be able to find anything worthwhile. In order to get even closer to the chief instructor, recruit John needs to get excellent results on the exam. Therefore, he needs to work on his own body. But because he has only mastered half of the Divine Dragon's breathing technique, there will be a limit to his progress. Being on the mountain ridge is not so bad, and the determined Jan must take advantage of this opportunity. There are two treasures in the Mountains of Blades that no one has heard of yet. If the guy can get them, he will become stronger and faster. Suddenly, the chief instructor Damien asked one of his subordinates something in a very surprised tone, not knowing if it was true. The change in Damien's mood did not escape the notice of the 974th recruit. The instructor seemed confused after hearing what he had said. Then Damien and his two assistants knelt down, and the chief demanded that his men show their respect. The sole ruler of the Kabbalan Empire, the legitimate heir to His Majesty the Emperor, appeared on the pedestal and was greeted. Yin watched the proceedings with excitement, and if his memory served him correctly, 500 cadets had died during the exam. Nothing special had happened then, but something unusual had clearly happened if Crown Prince Leon Kabbalan had appeared. Recruit Jan stared at the heir to the throne with wide eyes, not understanding the reasons for his presence here in the center. The Crown Prince himself had come here, and the 974th recruit could not forget it. While Leon Kabbalan greeted all the recruits in the square, John remembered that he was the last one he saw before his death. For the young man, it was the face of a real monster, for whom Jan's life was just a toy. The painful memories were fresh, as if everything was right before his eyes, and the recruits stared intently at this man. Continuing his presentation to the students of the Special Purpose Center, The prince gave his full name and title. Those present at the meeting bowed one knee and began to greet His Highness Crown Prince Leon Cabalan. Forced to bow to the future ruler, Yang looked at him and thought that he would never regret anything again. But when the new recruit of the Special Forces saw the face of Crown Prince Leon, rage began to boil inside him. Continuing his speech, the guest, as the bearer of the title of Crown Prince, asked the people to speak without fear. Shouting, Leon ordered those who wanted to get out of this hellish place right now to raise their hands, and he swore by his name and promised to ensure their safety. Turning his face away, Damien listened as the Crown Prince asked those who had been brought here by force to respond, promising to free all these people. Surprised by Leon Caballan's strange speech, Jan looked at the prince, not understanding what he was saying in the presence of the chief instructor. The new recruit to the squad was already seriously doubting whether this was the Crown Prince he had known before. There was a chessboard on the table, and one man was telling another about the invasion of enemy territory by the 4th Special Unit. In the residence of the Emperor of the capital, Avalon, Jan bowed and told the ruler about the successful outcome and the actual burning of the Manastone mine. Looking out the window of his residence, the Emperor praised his subordinates for a job well done. Continuing to bow, Yang announced his intention to send reinforcements to the group to ensure a successful retreat, surprising the ruler. Yang explained that the invading force was too small to ensure a safe retreat, as there was no guarantee that they would return alive. Not turning his back on his subordinate, the emperor had already made a decision on the matter and was preparing to announce it to the young man. After hearing the order, which was to take no action to help the group so that its people would sacrifice themselves to destroy the enemies, Yang objected. The warrior expressed his unwillingness to abandon his own soldiers fighting for the future of the empire. But for the emperor, they and the whole world were chess pieces. The ruler of the state treated slaves and citizens of the empire, knights and representatives of the aristocracy as chess pieces. All these pieces exist only for the sake of the emperor. And that is exactly how Leon Caballan saw it. Hundreds and thousands of people die for their sole ruler. This is how the ideal world is arranged in His Majesty's understanding. Looking back slightly, Leon Caballan smiled and asked what could be more honorable than dying for one's own emperor. Yang looked gloomily at the ruler and considered him an extremely bad person. The young man remembers very well what he is really like. Continuing his speech to the recruits, the Crown Prince mentioned some of the children of aristocrats who had entered this place to gain power. Shouting, Leon Caballan advised people to go home if they did not want to face the consequences when he took the throne of the empire. Yang couldn't believe what he heard, and neither could another recruit standing nearby, even though the words came from the Crown Prince himself. Without taking his eyes off Leon Caballan, the 974th did not know if this was the same person he knew and how he had changed so much. The chief instructor believes that the cadets are shocked by the prince's words, and the prince is interested in the reason for his inhumane treatment of them. Damien declared the need for a special unit to protect the emperor, but his last words angered the heir to the throne. Bowing his head submissively, the chief instructor of the organization hears Leon Caballan's demand to stop talking nonsense. According to the prince, the emperor must protect the people, and the crown will not remain on the ruler's head for long if he condemns to death those he is supposed to protect. Leon Caballan did not understand the point of such power, and he himself could not allow lawlessness to flourish. Wanting to destroy this place, the prince heard Damien say that it was created by the emperor's will and that everything here is done in accordance with the law. Hearing the chief instructor's arguments about the creation of this organization with a great sword by order of the ruler, the heir was surprised. Determined, Prince Caballan is interested in the personalities of the cadets who agreed to take this exam, and if there are any, he will back down. The recruits who continued to kneel did not see a single person willing to take the deadly test. The future ruler immediately pointed this out to the chief instructor, Damien, who looked away gloomily and mentally called the prince a populist. Unexpectedly, one of the recruits stood up, apologized to His Highness, and addressed him, shocking the others. Standing resolutely before them, Recruit 974 announced his desire to take part in the exam. The astonished Crown Prince looked at this strange young man, but the number he had announced seemed quite familiar to Leon Caballan. As far as the prince knew, low-ranking cadets were treated unfairly, and the recruit clearly wanted to leave, so Yang confirmed the rumors about the treatment. His comrades thought their colleague was crazy after such a confession, but the recruit himself declared equality in some things, regardless of rank. Not wanting to cancel the exam, Yang said that they were equal here in terms of assessing the skills that would allow them to rise in the hierarchy. Staring intently at the Crown Prince, The brave recruit declared his intention to take the exam because he had something to strive for. After listening to Yang's powerful speech, Leon Cabalan was silent for a while and only then called the chief instructor of the squad. The latter responded, but the Crown Prince had already turned away from Damien and declared that the instructor did not deserve such a cadet. Closing his eyes, Leon said he did not want to go back on his word and told his subordinate to continue with the exam. Prince Cabalan intended to personally observe what was happening at the training center for recruits, and Damien immediately accepted his order. Returning to the recruits, the chief instructor demanded that they recognize the prince's generosity and do everything possible to repay him for his kindness. Two instructors in red came down to the group of students and continued their work, asking them to listen carefully to their explanation of how the warp gate works. Initially, the recruits would pass through the gate and be teleported to the mountain range where the exam was usually held. Then the mission leaders would determine the location of the participants who would end up at various points. The recruits were puzzled when the mentors asked them not to worry about the possible splitting of some of the guys' bodies during teleportation. Immediately after that, the instructors called over number 974, who was standing nearby, and pointed him to the right place. When the guy took his place for teleportation, the activation of the gate was announced, and there were only seconds left before the relocation. Yun, waiting to be transported to the mountain range with the monsters, remembered that in his previous life, Leon had never come to the training center. But now everything was different, and the young man thought that his own actions had influenced the air, but that might not be the reason. While the young man continued to reflect on himself and the heir to the imperial throne, there were only seconds left before the magical gate was activated. The teleportation began, but Recruit Yang still could not understand the reason for Leon Caballan's change in behavior. A white stream of air descended from the dark skies onto the mountain ridge, and there was not a soul around. The head of the recruit John appeared on the surface of a bright, magical space on the gloomy rocks. The teleportation process was coming to an end, and the brave young warrior was gradually emerging from the magical place. Finally, the young man found himself entirely in the new territory, and upon checking his limbs, he was convinced that they were intact. Assuming that he had been thrown onto some kind of wasteland on the ridge, the guy decided to start by finding something that could be used as a weapon. Walking through unfamiliar terrain, Yang smelled a strange odor that he hadn't smelled in a long time. Being on the mountain ridge of Klinka, the Valley of Winds, the young man recognized the smell as the stench of sulfur mixed with the demonic energy of the valley. Suspicious sounds were heard behind him, and the brave warrior immediately turned his attention to them. Spreading its huge fingers, an unknown monster with burning eyes rushed at Yang, who did not even have a weapon with him. At another point in the Mountains of Blades, the giant Kakadu griffin attacked a group of recruits from the training center, opening its huge mouth. Armed with sharp swords, the recruits were terrified and wanted to flee the battlefield, fearing death. The large cockatoo continued to make eerie bird sounds, spreading fear among the young men sent by the organization. To the great surprise of the recruits participating in the exam, the bird received a fatal blow, from which it suffered complete destruction. It was the 15th stage of the Dark Soul and Lorena Beowulf, who had eliminated the terrible cockatoo griffin with her own weapon. Only now did the recruits from the training center recognize this beautiful girl, who was ranked number 1 in the cadet group. Thanking Lorena for saving them, the boys who otherwise would have died saw the wounded among them and asked if there were only low-ranking members in the squad. According to the boys, they were mostly number 700s and many had been injured. They had planned to get out of there, but it was all because of these monsters. When they asked Ms. Lorena for permission to follow her at least until they left the valley, she agreed because Ms. Beowulf didn't care either way. At that moment, the girl was looking at the gloomy terrain and searching for John with her eyes, not wanting to believe that he had already been eliminated from the game. Remembering how the guy had remained confident even in the presence of the Crown Prince, Lorena did not understand why he had done it. The second cadet, Cruel Dwight, approaching her, believes that their princess, as he called the lady, is once again making foolish decisions. His partner thinks Miss Beowulf is going to wander around here with these 7th-rate recruits, but in doing so, she will expose herself. Calling the low-ranking recruits idiots, Cruel Dwight does not consider them suitable even as a human shield for her, Lorena. The angry guy reproaches the girl, as if she wants to be a nanny for the guys, but her pity won't help them. Lorena asks her colleague to watch his language. Lady Beowulf asks not to judge a person solely by their number, but Cruel now thinks that the top spot after the exam will go to another cadet. Looking sternly at her comrade at the training center, Lorena warns him against thinking only about numbers. Otherwise, he will miss something more important. Engrossed in conversation, the guys did not notice the approach of the third cadet, Casa Afrena, who criticized her colleagues for sorting out their differences in their free time. Considering Cruella short-sighted, Casa reminded them that they would receive individual grades for the exam, so there was no need to compete with each other. Dwight was curious about her desire to hang out with lower-ranking cadets, but Casa believed that a large squad would be better able to cope with crises and that she would help them pass the test. She reminded the third-ranked cadet of the obligation of representatives of aristocratic families to take leadership over commoners. Her colleague's mention of aristocrats only provoked a sneer from the malicious Cruel, as if he did not consider her to be one. Casa Afrane stared intently at her second partner, who wanted to know since when a family of traders had been considered aristocrats. And if the girl intended to rule over commoners, then let her answer Cruel about what her family had done to the people. And she needed to be careful, or it would be very sad to see the last of the Afrane family on the guillotine. Casa smiled quietly and, laughing, thanked her colleague for his concern, but she was fixated on rebuilding her family. Continuing to sort out the tense relationships in the rocky terrain, the third cadet told Cruel how jealous she was of her at times like this. Reminding recruit Dwight of his two older brothers, the girl stated that they were responsible for their family, not him. When she advised Cruel not to burden his mind with complicated thoughts, the guy wanted to hit Casa, but his hand was intercepted. Lorena Beowulf, who arrived at the scene of the conflict just in time, held back the aggressive Dwight, with Casa standing nearby with a smile. Insulting the girl, the second cadet tried to grab her with the fingers of his left hand, but without success. Standing nearby, Lorena calmly demanded that her partner immediately calm down. Not daring to go against Ms. Beowulf, Cruel only hissed with anger and gritted his teeth. Then he demanded that Lorena let go of his hand and got rid of his squad mate's touch. Moving away from the first and third members of the squad, as well as the low-ranking fighters nearby, Cruel called everyone worthless. The students fought terrifying monsters among the huge, sharp white rocks of the Blades mountain range. Walking through this area, Cruel Dwight came to the conclusion that it would only get worse for him if he continued to hang out with his current partners. Suddenly, Cruel stopped. An unexpected thought popped into his head, and it seemed right to him. He remembered how, when he was little, a man stood over him and taught him not to ask for anything, not to think about anything, and to live as if he were dead. Continuing to walk across the rocky terrain, Cruel did not think he would remember that day again, but suddenly he stumbled upon traces of someone's blood. Looking ahead, the second recruit, Dwight, saw that the trail led to the rocks, that there was a strange smell, and that the blood was very fresh. If this was a monster's lair, then Cruel and his colleagues would be in trouble if there were many creatures there. So he decided to hide and assess the situation. Peeking out from behind his hiding place behind a rock, the second cadet saw a guy in a recruit's uniform and several corpses of local monsters next to him. The bodies of red goblins lay on the ground, and Cruel was puzzled by this man's apparent ability to kill so many monsters. Dwight stared intently at the guy, not understanding what he was doing down in the rock gorge. The young man there, his face contorted with insane aggression, was holding pieces of a red goblin's body in his hands, so it seemed to Cruel that he was eating them. And when Dwight made this gruesome assumption, the unknown man brought the monster's internal organ to his mouth. In the Blade Mountains, which are deadly dangerous due to the presence of terrifying monsters, there are two important artifacts. Now, the 974th recruit must obtain these items in order for the young man's plan to work. Thinking about how to bring it to life, Yang was about to go get one thing first. The guy quickly turned his gaze back. Something strange was happening there, and it required his careful attention. A terrifying monster with sinister eyes was trying to attack him from behind, wanting to get some human flesh for itself. Suddenly, a human hand pierced the body of the terrifying monster and pulled out its heart. In this operation, the young warrior used the 21st form of the dark spirit called Dragon Flame. Yang stared piercingly at the red goblin that wanted to destroy him and provoked it to catch fire. The aggressive creature could not resist the much stronger human, and screaming in pain, was eliminated. Yan, a recruit of the Special Forces, emerged victorious from this dangerous duel and held a heart with strange stones in his hands. The fighting did not end there, and another terrifying red goblin appeared, demanding meat. Yang looked ahead and saw many similar creatures sitting on the rocks, wanting the same thing as their kin. The undaunted recruit from the center looked resolutely at the monsters and rejoiced in his good fortune. The red goblin stared at the young man with terrifying burning eyes, ready to pounce on him and kill him at any moment. The guy was surprised that the first target jumped into his hands and took up a fighting position with glowing magic. Ignoring the enemy's magic, the monsters opened their terrible mouths and rushed to attack the lone man. In a state of warlike frenzy, Yang, his eyes wide open, was ready to defeat his enemies. Mana stones are given for defeating monsters. They were previously used as raw materials for creating magical items, but then their value was reevaluated. Old Professor Isaac, who worked at the academy, once published a scientific paper after conducting painstaking research. In his paper, the mage Isaac wrote about absorbing the abilities of monsters and their mana using mana stones. The professor's descriptions of the endurance of orcs, the regeneration of trolls, and the physical strength of ogres caused outrage among scientists. The elderly Professor Isaac's colleagues considered his work to be delusional and pointed out the significant difference between the use of mana by humans and monsters. Then the dean of the academy, Neuron, came to the scientist and threatened to dismiss his colleague from the educational institution if he could not confirm his research. After testing the professor's methodology, the previously frail Neuron noticeably gained muscle strength, thus proving the scientific work. When Isaac's claim was confirmed, people who used mana across the continent were alarmed. But today, monsters are much easier to find in the kingdom's pharmacies than in dark dungeons. When asked about the difficulty of absorbing mana crystals, Professor Isaac replied during his break that it was quite difficult to extract the poison from them. To implement this plan, the Academy scientist recommends using moon beetle juice and lava stones. Drinking the contents of his mug, Professor Isaac stated that normal mana absorption is very simple. The stones just need to be eaten. And that's what Center Yan's recruit was doing now in the lair behind the rocks in the Blade Mountains. Standing over the corpses of red goblins, the recruit did not expect such a step, and the guy still cannot stand the taste. Now he needed to absorb a stone that belonged to the monster's heart 2-to-1. But then he would have to use the monster's poison to absorb the mana from the crystal, and this made Yang almost vomit, so he covered his mouth with his hand, preparing himself for the risk of death. The recruit felt as if the poison was eating away at him from the inside, but he could neutralize it with the Divine Dragon's breathing technique. Now the guy wasn't feeling so bad. It seemed that all this would take more time than he thought, and he couldn't rush here. Down into the gorge at full speed flew recruit number 2, Cruel Dwayne, who couldn't stay out of John's actions. The malicious grin on the face of the second recruit, who was not known for his kindness, testified to his evil intentions. But below, where the 974th recruit had been just a minute ago, there was only a bright light and emptiness. The smirking Cruel did not expect to find a cadet of such a low level here, but confident in his invincibility, the villain decided to take the mana for himself. But Yang was absent, which surprised Cruel Dwight, who looked around and did not understand where his rival had gone. While he thought that Yang had simply run away, the latter was standing behind a rock ledge and talking about a scoundrel like Cruel, who was more dangerous than the monsters in the Blade Mountains. The second recruit had heard about the existence of savages who ate animals, but it looked worse than the guy had imagined. Calling Jan worthless, Cruel would have beaten him up, but if he begged for mercy, he would spare the guy. And if the recruit gave up the stones, Dwight would show the mercy of the aristocrats. Putting on a surprised face, the 974th recruit admitted that he didn't have any mana crystals because he had eaten them. The villain asked the guy not to lie. He was already about to take pity on him, but Yan the savage turned out to be too stupid. There is no one here. No one will find out about Cruel's murder of such a minor pawn, and if Yang wants to live, let him give up the stones. But the recruit suddenly agreed coldly. With a devilish expression on his face, Yang looked at his opponent, nodding to him as a sign that there really was no one here. Not paying much attention to Yang's words, Cruel agreed to respect his opponent's choice, but he shouldn't even think about making a sound. While talking and threatening the low-ranking recruit, his high-ranking colleague did not notice a suspicious white stream coming towards him. In a split second, the arrogant, insolent man passed through this magical substance and received punishment from Yan. A large blue banner with a crown and cross fluttered in the wind and shone brightly in the sunlight. The little boy was supposed to become the next owner of the Dwight mansion, but at the age of 12, he realized that most of the world was inhabited by scum. The fact that this child was the heir to a huge estate was self-evident, but there were outsiders involved in the matter. 2 very bad people stood over the boy, afraid that he would eventually become the head of the family, so they resorted to extreme measures. Under the guise of caring about his education, These two villains sent the unfortunate child to a special warrior training center. The boy was thrown into a dirty dump, and he will not forgive them. He, Cruel, is the true heir to the Dwight clan and will burn the bandits when he gets out of there. And when the low-ranking recruit Yang pierced the aristocrat with a magical glow, he screamed from the intense pain that appeared in his body. There is only one path under the rocks, and it is called Snake Gorge because it resembles this animal. And no living creatures go there. No one has reached its end. The injured Cruel insulted Yang, indignant at how he dared to treat him this way and speak to him in such an inappropriate manner. The aristocrat dragged a bag behind him, from which the paws of destroyed red goblins were visible, and did not know what Jan would do. A collar and rope were attached to the neck of Cruel's second recruit, Dwight, with which the 974th controlled his prisoner. Holding the handle of the large bag, Dwight assured him that Yang could not do anything bad to him because Cruel was the true heir to his family. When the captive asked the winner of their duel to wait, the latter ordered him to shut up and move even faster. Pulling the rope even tighter, Jan, a new recruit to the Special Forces unit, expressed his incomprehension as to why Dwight had started talking about his family. Yang didn't like that the heir to the Count's family was constantly whining and how long it would last. And since they had a long way to go, the guy needed to hurry up. Then Cruel suggested that his opponent carry the bag himself, not understanding why he was being forced to do so, but Yang blamed him for it, saying it was a simple punishment for a villain. Dwight doesn't understand anything. He doesn't know why Jan needs all these corpses of scary goblins. The younger recruit demands that he shut up. He complains too much. With a malicious grin, Cruel reminded his companion of the laws of the Empire, according to which he would be punished for mistreating an aristocrat. Trying once again to assert himself as the heir to Count Dwight, recruit number 2 received a large stone in his nose. Falling to the ground, he complained about being hit right in the nose, but Yang demanded that he get up quickly and that aristocrats also feel pain when they are beaten. Cruel held his injured body part and did not understand who this guy in front of him was. At that moment, the aristocrat thought he would catch his low-ranking opponent off guard in case of a sudden attack, but it turned out differently. Then Cruel Dwight shouted, demanding that the 974th recruit do nothing, promising to kill the guy for it. But the lower status recruit Yang, who did not listen to him, silently delivered a powerful blow to his vicious opponent and stunned him. The arrogant heir to the Count, who had not learned his first lesson, continued to shout at Yang not to dare do anything to him, but Yang did not listen to him. The brave opponent, with a stony expression on his face, continued to attack Cruel, who no longer had any desire to be upset by what was happening. To Dwight, who did not expect such humiliation, Yang explained how to avoid being hit in the face, even when making a mistake. But to do so, one must apologize. Cruel could not lose to his opponent, even if he was unable to concentrate his mana flow during the battle. But once it was restored, he had to kill the enemy immediately. Yang's eyes became wild again, and he turned to his opponent walking behind him, thinking that he had not understood anything the winner had said. The eyes of the young recruit of the Special Forces unit lit up with a fiery glare, and he was ready to repeat his words. The Count's heir looked at his offender with no less malice, pulling the rope, ready to promise Yan a terrible fate. But in the next moment, Dwight's expression changed and he softened. He now respected Jan and wanted to be friends with him in the future. But 974 could see all the thoughts in Cruel's head, so he had to keep quiet if he didn't want to crawl around like a cockroach. Turning back and looking at his defeated opponent from an aristocratic family, John considered him a remarkable character. The junior recruit noticed a thirst for life in the Count's heir, but the energy flows emanating from him are disorderly. He knew of only one thing capable of radiating such energy, and that was demonic knowledge. There are also sorcerers who actively use black magic and the power of darkness in their activities. Therefore, there are also warriors who use darkness in sword fights and achieve success more quickly. But for those who use black magic, their minds and bodies gradually fall into ruin. When the terrible darkness completely engulfs these people, the most frightening thing happens. They go mad. In his past life, the aristocratic recruit of the Cruel Dwight squad was nicknamed the Bloodstar. The thing is, this young man managed to lead his own family thanks to his cruelty. Reflecting on this, recruit Yang suggested that the reason for all this could be Cruel's demonic knowledge, but he had not yet fully mastered it. Dwight asked to have his collar removed and assured him that he would not run away, as this was the only way out, although Yang did not trust him. He did not consider himself an animal for losing the battle, and it seemed strange when someone led men on a leash. And his guide must understand if people suddenly think something about them. And here Jan put on a naive face, as if agreeing with Cruel. The 974th recruit of the squad really took off the prisoner's collar, and it hung in the air. Now Dwight could breathe. It seemed to him that Jan would lead him around for the rest of his life. But the younger recruit reassured the guy that his suffering would soon come to an end. Jan announced that they had arrived at their destination, but the aristocrat did not understand where they were now. Everything here was unfamiliar to him. Staring intently ahead, the 974th recruit spoke about the most important reason they were here. Both guys were on a cliff, and below was some mysterious complex, and here was the real treasure. Young, who was considered a low-ranking recruit, corrected himself, because it wasn't even treasure, but a monster. Cruel Dwight, having listened to his rival, now cannot believe in his desire to drag an aristocratic recruit to such a place in order to dump corpses. After throwing the bodies of the eliminated red monsters into the abyss, Cruel completed Yang's task. He was curious whether he had done his job correctly or not. In gratitude for the hard work, John is ready to give advice to his companion today, which involuntarily surprises him. John looked with some tenderness at his defeated enemy, who did not quite understand the man standing next to him. Then the conqueror of the Red Goblins advised Cruel to run away from there immediately and not look back. The young man's recommendation was extremely timely, because at the bottom of the black abyss, two lights suddenly appeared, as if they were the eyes of a demon. At the very bottom, near a large complex, lay the corpses of red goblins in various places. The terrifying creatures, showing no signs of life, had found their final resting place in this strange place. Suddenly, mysterious black outlines began to appear on the floor, gradually transforming into a single whole. After a certain amount of time, the final image of a magical black symbol appeared. The pattern began to glow red and seemed to come to life, and then a terrifying sound was heard, as if someone was asking a question. A black demon with burning hellish eyes appeared, whom someone had now dared to wake up after a long sleep. Standing on the edge of the cliff, the aristocratic recruit Cruel Dwight panicked and shouted at Jan, not understanding his actions in this snake gorge. But below, terrifying demonic eyes burned, and Jan asked his opponent what he was doing. Turning toward his former captive, the 974th recruit pointed to the arrival of him, this creature. Gradually, the contours of this terrifying hellish creature emerging from the depths of the eerie abyss began to take shape. Opening its lifeless eye, the demonic creature demanded people's souls. Casa Afrain, who was on the surface, immediately sensed strange changes and asked Lorena about her feelings on the matter. The focused Miss Beowulf also felt the inexplicable changes and understood what had just happened. They stood on the rocks, and Lorena felt an overwhelming surge of black magic emanating from Snake Gorge, not understanding what was happening there. Turning back in fear, Lady Casa Afrain told her friend that she had never encountered anything like this before and was uncertain. Now the girls were concerned with the most important question, which was how powerful this new magic was. Lorena Beowulf looked firmly at her companion Casa and announced an urgent change to their previous plans. Now she considers it necessary to return to the gates immediately. But Casa does not understand the reason for such suddenness. Approaching the recruits, and despite the exam, Lorena ordered them to go to the gate and drop all their cargo, including the mana stones, urging them to run and evacuate. The recruits near the stone arch obeyed their commander's order, but not all of them understood the reason for such haste. It was Casa, and now Lorena reminded her of her friend's question about the power level of this black magic. Turning away, Lady Beowulf said that this type of magic was as powerful as her own father's. Hearing this confession, Casa Afrain was very surprised, because she knew her comrade's parent very well. This man was the divine guardian of the North, famous for his incredible strength, one of the 5 fingers of the Empire. Remembering Lorena Beowulf's father, recruit number 3 could not believe that the new magic could be as strong as him. The saddened girl believes that none of the instructors at the training center will be able to stop such a monster, and this is a complete horror for her. At the instructor's location, events began to unfold after the hellish demon awoke. One of the instructors in a red uniform pointed to the sky, where something was flying, but his partner demanded that he stop fooling around and get moving. The creature's sharp fangs terrified even the bravest person, and the demon demanded more and more. It was not enough for him. Suddenly, strange things began to happen to the center's instructors. People seemed to fall into complete madness and go insane. A recruit who had not yet fallen under the influence asked Roman, who was standing nearby, what the hell was going on. but he did not know and asked his comrade to continue beating. Something like a hellish flame appeared, in which the souls of these unfortunate people, who had been captured by the demon, seemed to be burning. The terrifying demon, awakened at the bottom of the abyss, rejoiced, and on its bloody tongue appeared the very symbol that was stained with blood below. The creature demanded that the people give up their souls, and they, in turn, frantically ran forward, seeking salvation from the unknown monster. The recruits of the training center rushed away from the evil demon at full speed. The gaps between the sharp rocks could have been an obstacle to the successful evacuation of the recruits, but even the frightened people passed through them. One by one, the squad instructors and recruits ran forward, knowing that very soon they would reach the gates for teleportation back. Miss Lorena Beowulf was the first to hear the strange sound, and she immediately ordered everyone to stop. Putting her hand out to stop her charges, the girl and her people looked at the recruit who had been ordered by a voice in his head not to stop. This unfortunate man who had gone mad claimed that the mysterious voice was telling him to give up his own soul. The former warrior's condition was changing before their eyes, his face quickly losing its human features, and the demon-possessed man continued to talk about his soul. Lorena Beowulf stared wide-eyed at the doomed man, who could no longer be helped. In the next moment, the unfortunate man exploded. His physical shell was destroyed, and his soul went to the terrible demon of the underworld. The agitated recruit of Squad Number 1 thought that their group had been ambushed, but Casa Afrain asked her comrade-in-arms to look the other way. The blood left behind by the self-destructed man began to behave strangely and move, to the surprise of everyone. As a result of their own observations, the recruits and mentors came to the conclusion that the blood of the slain man was forming an unusual pattern. It was the very same bloody magic seal that first appeared at the bottom of the dark and terrifying abyss from whence the demonic creature had emerged. The creature discovered the people trying to escape, and strange changes began to occur to the recruits. They complained of pain in their heads. Grabbing her weapon, Lorena Beowulf kept her composure in this difficult situation and urged her subordinates to be cautious. Looking ahead resolutely, she was ready for new confrontations with alien forces that could attack people. From behind the corner of the rock, where the monster's magical seal glowed red, a hand with long fingers and sharp claws appeared. The dark creature that emerged from there claimed that it was the people here who had awakened it. Thanks to the participants of the mission in the Mountains of Blades, this terrible creature, bringing madness, had awakened. This inhuman thing with hideous features intends to repay the people for its awakening with their deaths. Finally, the ancient Lich, a creature with multiple arms and a three-eyed skull, appeared before the instructors and recruits. The lights in the monster's empty, soulless eyes burned with hellish flames and could bring only evil to humanity. At that time, wizards were in mourning, and magic was infinite, but human life also had its limits. However, greedy sorcerers found a way to comprehend all magic, using a witchcraft seal to achieve their own goals. After some time, the magical symbol lit up with a bright light, but to achieve this, the wizards sold their souls to darkness and gained eternity. The forces of darkness, striving for perfection in the magical arts, had to take drastic measures to achieve this. After certain movements, the head of one of the magic scholars ended up in his own hands, but without this, he would not have achieved what he desired. The wizard transformed into a monster that hates all living things around him and thus crossed the line between good and evil. Having turned into a lich, he became part of the demonic forces and could only bring chaos, hatred, and evil. For Lorena, he was not just a lich who had consumed countless lives. She did not understand the reason for his appearance today. A cry rang out over Snake Gorge, someone calling their leader, and it echoed across the vast terrain. His accomplices, Jake and Todd, who were chasing after the 12th recruit Roman, were curious about the reason for such a sudden escape. Roman told the guys to be quiet and look both ways, but ahead of them appeared the corpses of recruits from the training center in red uniforms. Looking at their unfortunate comrades, the guys were shocked by the death of the cadets, not understanding who could have done such a terrible thing. Depressed by what he saw, Roman thought about his own situation and remembered his comrade Jan, with whom he had escaped from the training center. Shortly before the start of the teleportation to the Klinka mountain range, they had met at a general meeting of the organization's recruits. Disheveled, Roman walked with Yan and discussed their unsuccessful escape. But at the same time, things were not as bad as the guys had initially thought. One suggested that the other go with him to the mountains, and the other reminded him of the danger of staying there alone, but the recruit intended to go alone. Turning to the 12th, John decided to tell him something, because the two guys already had a lot in common, and Roman immediately became attentive. If his friend felt that something terrible was coming, he should immediately run through the gate and forget about the exam. Stunned by what he heard, Roman came to the conclusion that 974 had already managed to plan this. At that time, Roman did not know what his friend had done, but now at Snake Gorge, the recruits and instructors were confronted with an ancient evil. The bony paws of a terrifying demonic creature stepped on the cold rock toward Lorene Benwolf and her companions. Surrounded by flying skulls, the powerful Lich called the people pathetic mortals who had awakened him from his sleep. The mentors urged the recruits to forget about the nearby gate and ordered them to run to the others closer to them. Number 3. While the recruits were preparing to retreat, their leader, Lorena Beowulf, demanded that everyone leave. Not wanting to leave her companion alone with the dangerous monster, Casa Efrain also suggested that the girl run away with all the students. The sharp blade of Lorena's sword glinted as she prepared to stay behind for the chance to fight the demonic beast. In full combat readiness, Miss Beowulf intends to detain the terrible Lich with her magic. Turning her gaze toward Casa, the brave Lorena asked her to help save the numerous cadets who were taking their exams here. Her companion tried to reassure her friend that she would not be able to cope with the dangerous monster alone, just as she herself could not. According to Lorena, Casa had to survive for the sake of her own family, so she had to leave. The girl had no choice but to agree with her friend. After Casa Efrain promised to do as the first recruit commanded, she ran away from the place. The third recruit ran forward resolutely, mentally apologizing to Lorena, but she couldn't die here. The ancient three-eyed Lich seemed to be looking at the girl left alone in front of him and calling her stupid. Standing opposite him, armed with only a sword, Lorena could not stop him alone, as the terrible demon assured the mortal. Knowing about the ancient Lich's magical abilities, the girl understood this, but decided to try to block the monster's path anyway. Lorena Beowulf had two important advantages that gave her a chance to defeat the demon. Among them was her incredibly sharp sword, whose main advantage was that it was made of mithril, capable of destroying the undead. Something happened ahead, so Cadet Number 1 had to interrupt his own thoughts and turn his attention to Lich. There were more flying skulls with spines near the monster, which increased its chances of winning the upcoming battle. In a very short time, the ancient Lich summoned a multitude of terrifying skulls and launched them at Lorena. In front of the monster itself was the very magical seal that had awakened it, and now the creature wanted only the girl's death. The projectile of magical skulls was already flying towards Lady Beowulf to inflict a fatal wound on her and take possession of her soul. Unwilling to suffer defeat at the hands of the terrible Lich, Lorena rushed forward, trying to dodge the demonic blow. The brave girl's life was saved by a group of high-ranking recruits, a leap of defiance against the dark ceremony, and the wings of the windbird. The witch's skulls continued to fly toward the lady, and it seemed that nothing could help the brave beauty emerge from this battle unscathed. But the demonic creatures knew nothing about her sharp mithril sword, which easily struck down demons. Waiting until the skulls launched by the demon came closer, Lorena threw her spinning sword at them with the aim of dispelling the magical enemies. An incredibly bright light appeared as a result of the clash between the mithril weapon and the terrifying flying creatures. The ancient Lich could only watch silently as his first plans to destroy the girl, who was not afraid of him, were ruined. For the hellish creature, the brave Lorena Beowulf had prepared another way to get rid of him once and for all. The demon was utterly terrified when a super bright pillar of divine light, released by the girl, appeared before him. In her understanding, wizards are unable to cast both attack spells and defense spells at the same time. Thanks to this technique, Lady Number 1 was going to emerge victorious from the dangerous battle. Suddenly, something unusual happened. Something that the brave aristocrat did not expect to see on the battlefield. A protective seal appeared in front of Lich, but Lorena could not understand how the demon managed to cast two spells at the same time. Lady Beowulf did not believe in the ability of demonic skulls to cast spells, but if so, how many spells could all these skeletons cast? Surprised by these unpleasant discoveries, the girl did not notice another terrifying skull flying at her from behind. A moment later, the hellish creature sank its teeth into the body of the unfortunate beauty, who did not expect such a treacherous attack. Taken by surprise, Lorena Beowulf dropped her powerful mithril sword, on which she had pinned so many hopes in battle. She regretted losing her weapon, but the cold and terrifying tentacles had already wrapped around the neck of the unfortunate captive of the ancient Lich. Seeing the flying skulls rushing around her, Lorena demanded that these vile creatures release her immediately. Lady Beowulf hung in the air thanks to the flying magical skulls, not understanding what was happening. The terrifying lich approached the captive girl. This terrible creature, devouring human souls, needed her. Lorena looked with disgust at the creature that had seized her for having the courage to stand up to it in a dangerous battle. And now the awakened ancient evil intends to destroy the valiant soul of the noble girl, who was not afraid of it and entered into battle. The lich promised Lady Beowulf that he would turn her into a corpse that would serve only him. The demonic eye in the center of the lich's skull burned with hellish flames, as if predicting misfortune and death for all living things. After the ancient lich awoke, his large stone lair was as quiet as an underground sarcophagus. In front of the entrance to this eerie room, the former dwelling of a dangerous demon, stood the shadow of an unknown creature. To get inside the huge building, it was necessary to climb the steps, and it was right in front of them that the creature stood. The strange visitor wore all kinds of skins, and instead of a head, it had an animal skull with long, curved horns. The creature declared someone defenseless, but there were no people or monsters nearby. In front of the strange guest was a mysterious complex with black entrances to the halls of the ancient lich's palace. Suddenly, the mysterious visitor felt something incomprehensible beneath his feet, as if some kind of magic was rising from the ground. Approaching the steps of the complex, the creature stepped into a magical seal, which was actually a trap and was already burning with a bright light. Suddenly, a tall pillar of flame appeared, caused by the influence of higher fire magic and a flash of lightning. The fire burned stronger and stronger, so the horned monster had no chance of surviving such an incident. Finally, the outline of the horned creature appeared, striving to get inside the sinister house of the ancient and terrible lich. Mysteriously surviving the fire, the stranger removed his skull, which turned out to be an ordinary mask for disguise. Behind the terrifying skull appeared blue hair, and its owner admitted that he thought robbing the empty lair would be easy. This was the 974th recruit Yang, and he was met at the doorstep with weapons drawn. The guy used the armor of a volcanic armadillo, whose skin is resistant to fire and fire magic. He was well aware of the presence of 492 magical traps in the palace complex, and Yang had already climbed to the 12th floor of the lair. But when he was walking on the 36th floor, he remembered the presence of 30 moving traps in the dark building, and not only those. Using goblins to lure Lich out of the lair, Yang wanted to get the treasure, which was his original plan, and it would not be easy to carry it out. It was entirely possible to do so with sufficient knowledge of the lair's layout, and Yang had learned about the Lich while serving as captain of the squad. After the young soldier returned from a combat mission, he was given a report on this ancient demonic creature. The first training group on the Blade Ridge participated in the operation against the high-ranking monster, of which 900 died and 100 survived. Due to the losses, the center could have ceased operations, but the report mentioned the possibility of awakening the long-sleeping Lich after consuming the cadet's blood. As a result of the investigation, the location of the treasure was established, and the beast's lair itself was built in ancient times and is full of mysterious treasures. Among them was a huge library with books, one of which could make you a sage just by reading it. And in numerous boxes, there were various jewels, and just one coin could provide its owner with a comfortable life. Recalling all this information, the recruit Yang knew that the most important thing was missing from the lair of the demonic beast. It was the Vessel of Life, a magical egg that contained the life force and magical mana of the monster Lich. Lost in Yang's past life, the vessel should be in the lair, and the report indicated where it should be kept, but the artifact could have been destroyed in the battle with Lich. After studying the report, the 974th recruit remembered that the Vessel of Life, which was important to him, might be in the preserved Imperial Scroll. There was talk of the possibility of accepting the contents of the vessel, but it is impossible to assimilate its potential. However, the scroll does not mention another important point. Upon receiving the vessel, the mana stones will give us much more power, and then it will be quite feasible, and Yang will be able to comprehend the breath of the divine dragon. If the guy takes advantage of this opportunity, he will be able to surpass his own level from his past life, which made him happy in his present life. Yang passed under the high arches of a huge castle, where the ancient demon Lich had been in hibernation for a long time. Finally, the young recruit's journey to the center ended, and he found himself where he had been striving to be. Now the guy stood in front of a massive tall door, which according to his understanding, was the lower floor of the awakened demon's lair. As Yan had learned from the center's report, this was where the altar of the ancient Lich was supposed to be. Unable to bring himself to open the door, The young warrior recalled the details of the report that touched on this moment. To begin with, the skilled soldier tried to throw a lightning weapon to destroy the large doors. The steel blade, launched by John's skilled hands, flew straight at the barrier and seemed to shatter it into splinters. But something unexpected happened. The massive doors of the lair did not receive a single scratch, as if the dagger had not even been able to reach them. In the next moment, there was a loud crash that sent Jan flying to the side, and a magical mark appeared on the door. Quickly getting to his feet, the brave young man immediately guessed what the problem was. He had heard about the protection of these mighty doors before. Even before recruit Yang reached the gate, the incorporeal ghost noticed him, activating the Feistlock magic seal. The ghost, like a computer hologram, continued to hang in the air and did not recognize the face it was programmed to recognize. The incorporeal phantom, beginning to evaporate before disappearing completely, mentioned the correct face, the one it could let pass. Putting his hand on the wall, Yang tried to overcome the difficult obstacle anyway, knowing one sure way. Recalling the place described in the report he was studying, the brave conqueror of monsters ran his hand along the wall, searching for the very spot that was somewhere here. Finally discovering a square carved into the wall, Yang pressed it, gaining the necessary pass to the inner chambers of Lich's lair. There was a rumbling sound typical of castles, and doors that were invisible at first crept upward, revealing a dark and frightening space before Yang. It was a secret passage for moving slaves, and the report indicated that in the past there had been many such captives in the lair. The building resembled a real labyrinth with many primitive traps, so it would take some time to successfully overcome them. Remaining in a positive mood, Jan continued to consider himself the captain of a special squad, which meant that no one and nothing would leave him behind. Stepping onto the secret passageway, the guy headed for his goal, especially since he had plenty of time for it and would receive a big reward. At this time, Lauren, who had been captured by the evil demon Lich, stared intently at the monster that threatened her with death. The brave Lady Beowulf tried to resist the demonic creature, which was launching its terrifying red tentacles at her. In this deadly moment, the girl mocked this rotten skeleton, which stank of decay and was incapable of doing anything to her. The terrifying Lich laughed maliciously and could not wait to see the torment of the unfortunate girl's soul from the training center for recruits. The terrifying creature, which had emerged from the depths of hell, began to verbally taunt poor Lorena, telling her what it would do to her in the future. The Lich is ready to turn Lady Beowulf into a man-eating zombie, and then she will hardly remain as defiant as she is now. After finishing his terrifying speech, the hellish monster ordered the girl to forget about her chatter, preparing to destroy the poor beauty. Red tentacles flew toward the girl who had fallen into the hands of the demonic beast, foreshadowing her imminent demise. It seemed that the deadly, otherworldly, slimy creatures had finally taken control of recruit number 1, and that there was no chance of salvation. The ancient monster, anticipating his imminent victory over the human, continued to laugh mockingly. Suddenly, something happened that Lich did not expect to see at all, staring at the girl he had almost buried in his terrible thoughts. Without losing her desire to defeat the inhuman monster, Lady Lorena bit the demon's bloody tentacles with her strong teeth. He had not yet managed to intimidate her, and this infuriated Lich, who threatened to leave not a single piece of flesh from the brave aristocrat. Using the magic of dark destruction and dark fracture, Lich was about to turn poor Lady Beowulf into dust. Suddenly, the ancient demon stopped, his eyes still burning with hellfire, but he did not take any action to destroy his captive. Remaining resolute and looking boldly into the enemy's face, Lorena looked questioningly at the demon who, just a second ago, was about to kill her. She did not understand why Lich had stopped his attack and was now turning away excitedly. At that moment, the monster was experiencing strange feelings, and a truly terrifying thought for his existence arose in his hellish mind. Thanks to his supernatural abilities, the demon Lich saw through the walls the destruction of the barrier on the altar. A large crack glowed on the magical sign that was supposed to guard the beast's lair, where a stranger unknown to Lich had crept in. Accusing the girl of being nothing more than bait, the monster tightened its red tentacles around the unfortunate lady's neck even more. Lorena Beowulf did not understand his words, and Lich considered it all a planned move against him. And while he was distracted, someone climbed into the beast's lair. The demon viciously ordered the girl, who was trying to protest, to be quiet, and after rudely insulting the poor thing, threw her into a powerful wave of gravity. Recruit number 1 lay unconscious on the floor, while Lich ordered the flying skulls to return to the refuge and open the gates. Lich's magical mark began to turn bloody red again, and the skulls circled round and round according to the outline of the demonic symbol. With their actions, the monster's otherworldly helpers formed gate number 127 and 5 to return to the beast's lair. Passing through this portal, Lich gave the order to move him and the flying skulls to the altar in his castle. Lifting herself up on her hands, Lorena, noticeably weakened after the monster's blow, made plaintive sounds. Holding her injured body parts, the girl watched her departing tormentor and did not understand where he had decided to go. The altar of the Lich was bright, completely deserted, and filled with serene silence as if the demon had never awakened. In the central circle of the altar, where a minute ago there had been emptiness, the outline of the demon Lich's magical sign began to emerge. Now the symbol of the monster was fully visible on the once white altar, and the monster could freely ascend to this place sacred to him. Lich, who had burst into the room, was indignant at the intrusion of a stranger into his native abode, who dared to desecrate his sacred altar. The beast could not understand how the stranger had passed through all the traps and broken through the barrier created by Lich 1,000 years ago, for only he knew where the altar was. While the demon suspected that members of the Emperor's Guild of Wizards and Knights were responsible for the intrusion, he came across bottles filled with elixir. Looking at the transparent containers, the demon couldn't believe that someone could drink them, and this led the monster into a rage. Lich had spent 1,000 years perfecting these extra elixirs so that they would restore his mana and physical strength. It took the monster 1,000 years to transform into a human form, and now all his efforts had been wasted. The stranger who had entered the demon's lair sat on the far throne and reacted mockingly to the words about the elixirs, appreciating their rather pleasant taste. Hearing a human voice, the monster instantly turned in his direction and saw the one who had managed to break through the protective barrier in his lair. The 974th recruit continued to mock his hellish opponent and, sipping the elixir, asked him to calm down first. Jan invited Lich to come and drink with him, and if he wanted, the guy would save some of this wonderful drink for the monster. From excessive consumption of magical power, the guy fell into a state similar to alcohol intoxication and called it a bad decision to save the good for later. Seeing the young man, the ancient demon crossed the Guild of Wizards and the Emperor's Knights off his list of potential intruders. Realizing that the barrier had failed to withstand a drunken youngster, the archaic monster turned white with the hatred that sprayed from him. Yang saw the haste of Lich, whom he had distracted from his revelry, and it was great for the recruit to walk through the front entrance. But the demon ordered him to be silent and promised to kill him. Did Yang really think that his enemy would not find out about the intrusion into the rat's lair? The good warrior himself stole one rare item from the monster, but the monster did not notice it. Then he told about his passage through the secret tunnel. But Lich is sure that Yang is mocking him and does not understand why he broke the barrier at the front entrance. Hearing the words of his terrible enemy, the boy remembered how he had walked up the steps of the barrier to reach the altar. And at that moment, it seemed as if Lorena was watching room 974 and approving of his performance in front of Lich. Then Yanu simply wanted to break the protective barrier at the entrance. He deftly overcame the terrible incorporeal ghost and emerged victorious from the duel. In addition to elixirs, there were many ancient texts here, even a book called Dungeon about the mana engine, and Lich collected these works like a man possessed. The ancient demon seemed to laugh. He did not like the brave boy's words at all. After that, he asked the boy if he knew where the monster got all this. The monster's name was Momen, and he had turned into an undead creature 1,000 years ago for the sake of revenge and had been preparing for all this for 10 centuries. And a rat like the man who decided to invade his home decided to change all the plans of the otherworldly creature. To take revenge on the one who betrayed Lich and deprived him of everything he had, he cursed himself to exist as an undead creature. Because of the man, all of the monster's grand plans went down the drain. But Yang just kept drinking the elixir indifferently and mockingly asked the demon to continue. Stunned by the fearless behavior of the uninvited guest, the Lich silently stared at the recruit Yang, who complained of his own intoxication. In an effort to harm the young man, Lich raised his hand with a magical seal and began to insult Yang for his excessive self-importance. Using the spell of the Great Flame and the breath of the Raven, Lich set out to burn all the arrogant blood out of the brave young man. The brave recruit from their training center closed his eyes as if preparing his own strength to fight back against his evil opponent. But in the next moment, the young man's eyes opened and burned with the desire to stop the magical power of the ancient monster. Lich's hand, engulfed in bright flames, was already reaching for the recruit to grab him and deliver a fatal blow. The terrible demon was almost within reach of Yan, who seemed oblivious to the danger threatening him and stared intently at his opponent. Something unimaginable happened to Lich's mana energy, causing him to feel intense fear and excitement. At this crucial moment, the cool-headed recruit from the Special Forces unit reached into his pocket and praised the demon for his quick thinking. The ancient evil's hatred was incredible. He realized that the man had stolen his vessel of life, which was of great importance to Lich. With his left hand, Yang opened his chest, and the demon saw a brightly shining magical mark there, similar to the one Lich had. The white altar in the lair of the ancient creature, which Yang, a recruit from a special unit, had so desperately sought, was now completely empty. The young man ran at full speed across the bridge, trying to escape the wrath of the bloodthirsty monster. His warrior's agility came into play, and in a few moments the brave young man disappeared from the altar bridge. The boy's speed saved his life, because with the activation of wide-range fire magic and a shower of fire, something unimaginable began on the bridge. Trying to catch up with Yan, Lich called him a nobody who would not be able to escape his own death. But if he were in the young man's place, he would not stand still either. They continued to rush at full speed, and Yang told the demon about the use of his vessel of life, and that if he killed the young man, he would also die. When the monster said it had no intention of killing the recruit, he looked back at his terrifying pursuer with disbelief. The devilish creature planned to be reborn in the body of the center's 974th recruit. Since Yang had destroyed what Lich had been waiting for 1,000 years, the demon would deprive his enemy of his appearance, which was a fair exchange in Lich's understanding. Moreover, the young man's body contained the power of the elixirs created by the demon, so he would simply take it from Yan. Opening his eyes in surprise, the Special Forces soldier looks at the creature that has decided to take his body for itself. Putting on a tired face, Yang apologized to the ancient monster, but its desires are not part of the young man's plans. The Lich demanded that the young man surrender immediately and promised to treat his body with care when he was able to obtain it. After activating the parallel chain spell and the storm of curses, several magical seals appeared at once, which Yang saw. Now he had to use the dragon's divine breath because he had no other choice. A powerful yellow flame began to emerge from the red magical seals of the archaic monster Lich. The mana heart was activated, after which the magical symbol that Yang had encountered near the secret entrance burst into flames. Due to the powerful influence of the witchcraft spells, the demon's strong floor began to crumble in its lair. Lich had not used his own power for a long time, and did not understand how his opponent could still be alive. Suddenly appearing behind the monster, the recruit Yang ironically took the demon's anxiety for himself. The archaic monster did not expect such a bold appearance from the young man, and calling him a rude name, fired magic from a red seal. The Dark Dragon's rebellion began, and Yang, running at high speed, laughed at his opponent, who was only capable of such insignificant measures. In one of the corridors of the beast's lair, large doors were broken, as if they had been blown apart by a powerful blast wave. A bright pillar of light appeared in this room and almost completely destroyed the doors leading to the corridor. Fleeing from the evil demon's magic, Yang, a recruit of the Special Forces, did not think that everything would turn out this way. Mana is in constant motion in the heart, just like air in the lungs, and it is the true power of the divine dragon's breath. At that moment, the guy remembered how he gnawed on the hearts of monsters in the mountains of blades and magic stones, and just recently he had used up almost all of the elixir created by the ancient monster. The 974th recruit of the Special Forces unit is ready to eat anything to become stronger. He is even capable of consuming the vessel of the demon Lich's life, which will increase his own abilities. When Yang ate half of the vessel, which was important for his health and strength, the very magical mark that the demon saw appeared on his chest. At this rate, the guy will soon regain his strength to the level of his previous life and may even become many times stronger. Lost in his own thoughts, Yang rushed forward at full speed, oblivious to his surroundings. The young man had to brake quickly, his shoes sliding across the soft red carpet covering the floor of the monstrous beast's lair. The door disappeared in front of the young man, and he found himself at a dead end, although he clearly remembered that the exit was right there, and he couldn't understand how this had happened. Behind him, Lich was approaching, laughing loudly at Yan and comparing him to a rat choking on poison, activating traps, which is why there were no doors. Jan had nowhere to run, and the demon was interested in his next move. But the center's recruit took all the circumstances into account and decided to kill Lich. But at the same time, this is an impossible task, because Yan has no weapons or other important tools left, and he is now unable to resist the enemy. Folding his devilish hands, the monster promised the brave young man to rid him of his own limbs. After that, the terrible Lich activated the summoning ceremony, and a bloody magic seal appeared. After casting a spell to summon the undead and calling forth a demonic dragon skull, the ancient monster ordered it to bring the young man's body. Yang watched the terrifying events unfolding in the room and realized that he was not yet able to fully oppose the fearsome Lich. The ghostly dragon skull continued to glow with devilish fire, and it seemed that the last moments of the unfortunate recruit were approaching. A scarlet cloak characteristic of aristocrats flashed by, and a familiar voice asked Yan about his condition. While he was thinking about how to defeat this mad Lich, Prince Leon Cabalan appeared on the battlefield and asked Yan to hand over the demon to him. The heir to the throne had learned of the extraordinary incident that had occurred during the exam, which is why he had come here, but he had not expected to find such a monster here. The prince then accused Lich of killing hundreds of cadets and his men, and of causing countless flowers to wither before they could bloom. Leon Cabalan, who was extremely determined, had no intention of forgiving the culprit responsible for the deaths of many innocent people. The monster just stared silently at the suddenly appeared heir to the imperial throne, not expecting this. Bowing, Yang greeted His Highness, and Leon, looking at the young man, recognized him as the volunteer cadet, but he did not understand his presence here. Having rushed alone after Lich, Yang was stuck here, and Leon immediately understood who had informed him of the monster's location and thanked the young man for his work, suggesting that he flee. The young recruit was pleased that the crown prince had arrived just in time, but his old friend Roman, recruit number 12, was the real hero here. Shortly before the first exam, Yang asked his friend to give the chief instructor the coordinates 224 and 7 as soon as he reached the gate. But it was necessary for the crown prince to hear this too, and he was already standing in front of the demon, who was studying the flesh and energy of his unexpected opponent. The ancient Lich was curious about how Crown Prince Leon Cabalan was connected to Bahamut, but the latter did not understand what his otherworldly opponent was talking about. The monster became very agitated when the representative of the ruling house wanted to know why he mentioned the name of the empire's founder in Sui. Keeping his eyes on the terrifying demon, Leon Cabalan heard his indignation about the name of the founder, whose blood flows in the prince, which is ridiculous for a demon. Laughing, he called people stupid, but his opponent, Momona, rejoiced at the creation of the divine dragon's breath monster. For the creature, it was a special day, reminiscent of ancient times, and the man decides to kill Momona, who did his job perfectly. Only Bahamut could possess the breath of the divine dragon, and Lich rejoiced, for before him stood the blood descendant of his enemy. In the huge library stood a man whose shadow fell on the books, of which there were a great many. With his magical efforts, he created magical glowing seals on the wall. This man possessed powerful sorceress talent and knew how to create the magic he needed. The owner of the large library of books and the creator of the magical seals was the wizard Momen. Having spent his entire life in magical research and surrounded by books, he was interested in everything. Among the scientific researches of the magician Momen were the stable circulation and retention of the energy of the dungeons. He was very concerned with the question of expanding the boundaries and absorption power of the mana circle. The wizard was extremely curious to find out how much power he could obtain if he successfully combined everything into a single whole. To satisfy his curiosity, the wizard Momen began conducting experiments on the body of his close friend Bahamut. The wizard's experiments proved successful, and he was able to fill his friend's body with new mana, and thus her heart appeared. Having become physically fit, Bahamut did not miss a single opportunity to show off his muscular physique. But during one of his regular displays of his large muscles, the wizard's friend complained, and asking him not to put on a show, urged him to simply get dressed. Interested in his friend's new sensations, since there were noticeable changes in his stats, the mage learned of his desire to create a combat technique using his strength. Together, the two friends created a weapon based on the heart of mana, and Bahamut gave this new combat innovation a name. This incredible innovation, created by the mind and hands of the great wizard Momen, was called the Breath of the Divine Dragon. During their stay in the library, the sorcerer said that this was not the full extent of the heart's capabilities, but that its features were still being studied. The talented mage did not have time to finish what he wanted to say, as Bahamut suddenly approached him and began to apologize in a completely different voice. The bewildered wizard felt strange gusts of air, not immediately realizing the danger that was approaching. Looking at his hand, The scientist saw splashes of dark blood on it and asked his companion what it all meant. Bahamut, who had betrayed his friend, said that Momon's role as a wizard was over, and Momon did not understand how they could do this to him. Terrible stains flew onto the books in the library, while Bahamut talked to Momon and called him a wonderful and dear friend. Sitting by the cabinets, the traitor told Momon how, without him, he would not have been able to create either the heart of mana or the breath of the divine dragon. Bahamut looked at the unfortunate wizard and decided it was necessary to stop everything, because he knew too much. Leaving his now former friend, Bahamut, who had gained his powers thanks to him, believed that he alone should own everything they had created. Then the poor wizard wondered how much time had passed since his best friend betrayed him. Momona's physical body died, but with the help of the remnants of his magical power, he managed to hold on to his own soul. By repeating the same magic spell, the sorcerer was able to imprint its effect on his own decaying body. Decades passed, and the unfortunate Momon turned into a skeleton, with no indication that real life had once flowed through him. But one day a light flickered in the dark emptiness of his skull. The wizard's soul had returned to take revenge on the villain. The one who took everything from Momon will get what he deserves, and the one who betrayed the wizard's trust will be punished. The spirit of the treacherously murdered sorcerer was in a secret building, preparing for revenge for 1,000 years. A great stream of light caused a powerful explosion, and the stone door of one of the rooms flew open with a crash. After many centuries, the wizard found a second life, and in the form of an ancient demon, broke free to long-awaited freedom. He was ready to take revenge on his enemy's descendants, with flames burning in the empty eye sockets of the hellish creature, and nothing could stop him. Seeing a sudden brave opponent before him, Momon, who had become a lich, spoke harshly, preparing to destroy him. A bright light burned, fragments of the stone door flew, and the monster prepared for the battle he had been longing for all this time. With a parallel chain spell and a storm of curses, the demon lich promised to reduce his new opponent to dust. To increase his own strength and gain the ability to eliminate the enemy once and for all, Lich used the secret technique of Dragon's Breath. The ancient monster was surrounded by glowing magical seals, and nothing could stop him on his hellish path. The heir to the throne, Leon Cabalan, skillfully wielded his sword and summoned the magic of the Yellow Dragon River in an attempt to repel the enemy's attack. The skull of the long-dead wizard Momon is outraged by Bahamut's actions, who even after his death continues to torment the mage. The brave warrior who clashed with the demon in battle looked defiantly at his hellish opponent and demanded that he not utter Bahamut's name in Suya. A white glow and dark red mana fell to the ground, symbolizing the good royal heir and the devilish messenger of darkness. Cutting through the magical seals of the ancient demon with his magic sword, Leon Cabalan broke through them to his mortal enemy. The light of the yellow dragon burst into one of the remaining bloody seals to weaken the terrible monster. The magical technique used by the prince bore fruit in his desperate struggle with the demon. Lich saw that Leon was preventing the magic circle from activating, so he ordered his slaves to tie their opponent's legs. Before the prince, who had not lost his courage, appeared another series of bloody magic seals with many skulls. Grabbing the hilt of his sword, Leon mocked his attempts to stop the brave warrior with his own sorcery. Then the crown prince decisively thrust his cold weapon into the ground, thinking that it was even better for him that they had met here. The third form of the yellow dragon he summoned was an evil dragon spirit that easily destroyed Lich's magic seals. In this case, the ancient demon's black magic was no match for the light power of Prince Leon Cabalan. The evil demon was terrified of his actions and wanted him dead. But the heir with the seventh form of the yellow dragon summoning and the third form of the sword would remove the dead man from the past. Not willing to lose, the archaic demon Lich begins to use 5th level total destruction magic. In response to the monster's aggressive moves, Prince Leon drew the noble imperial sword. Finally, the two opponents clashed in a decisive battle, and only the strongest could emerge victorious from the deadly battle. Pillars of fire engulfed the hall where the heir to the imperial throne and the demonic monster clashed. For the special forces recruit watching the confrontation, it was all unbelievable. Folding his arms, the young man could not believe that Leon Cabalan was capable of fighting the monster Lich on equal terms, so it was unclear which of them was the monster. Recalling the heir's materialized sword, Yang believed that such power belonged only to a dragon with its breath effect. Keeping his eyes on the ongoing battle, the young man sees it as a great opportunity to find out what the prince is capable of. Leon continued to swing his magic sword and use the yellow dragon, and Yang considered a possible battle with him in the future. Smiling, the 974th recruit of the center understood well that his battle with the prince would not happen soon. Right now, it was much more important for the young man to find his own family, and he decided to try to escape. Just as he was about to do so, the boy heard a question addressed to him about where he was going. It was the center's captain, Rodrigo Mayer, who grabbed Jan by the shoulder and told him about the fun that was just beginning. Out of the corner of his eye, the young man glanced back at the officer who had arrived, realizing that he had completely forgotten about him. Without letting go of the young man's shoulder, Rodrigo Mayer began to talk about some peculiarities that concerned him. He first reminded him of the escaped cadets, then of the appearance of the demon Lich, and that number 974 always found himself at the center of events. Hearing the boy address him as Captain Rodrigo Mayer, the man looked disapprovingly at the cadet standing next to him. Then he corrected the young man, who should address him as Sir Captain, and recruit Jan involuntarily repeated the words spoken by his superior. Rodrigo was dissatisfied with modern education if the boy behaved this way with his superior, because this was not even military training, but basic etiquette. Chief Instructor Damien then tried to hide the fact that his subordinates had escaped from everyone at the recruit training center. But the papers containing information about those who had decided to escape soon reached the captain, who immediately studied them. He learned of the recruits' actions, and Mr. Rodrigo Mayer was very unhappy about the incident. Upon learning of the incident, the captain was unable to recover for a long time and stared intently at a single point in front of him with his blue eyes. It became known that 4 people had escaped from the training center, cadets numbered from 10 to 900. 3 of them were caught in the nearby forest by organization employees during a special search operation. The first to search for the escaped recruits was a group of 3 representatives from the training center who roamed the forest in search of the fugitives. Members of this third pursuit team were found dead, but the location of the cadets could not be determined at that time. Rodrigo Mayer, a recruit who was nearby, said that the runaway was indeed him. Now Jan learned from the captain of the center about the need for the chief instructor of the organization to go in search of the escaped young man. The elderly man does not understand how, with such a low rating, the young man managed to survive the pursuit squad and the chief instructor, and now the battle with Lich. Captain Rodrigo Mayer did not think that the young man was simply lucky, but Jan did not call these events mere luck. Hearing these words from the new recruit of the Special Forces unit, the old man looked at him intently with his clear blue eyes. For Jan, it was super luck. He must have done a lot of good deeds in his past life. But Rodrigo Mayer thought the young man was joking like an old man. They stood near the steps, and Jan recounted how he had no chance of escape, and a little more, and he would have fallen victim to Lich. But the prince saved the young man. Captain Mayer, who had turned away, did not believe the young man and did not consider it mere luck. But according to recruit Jan, he was indeed very lucky. Anticipating his own victory in the verbal confrontation with Rodrigo, Jan expressed hope that he would not be punished for his usual luck. Giving the boy a disapproving look, the captain thought of him as an unscrupulous person who still dared to behave this way with his superior. Rodrigo 974 seemed like an insolent man, but he could be the bastard son of some important aristocrat, although that was impossible. When recruit Yang asked the captain about the possibility of helping the crown prince, the man told him that it was nonsense. According to his superior, in such a case, the young man would only interfere with the crown prince in his battle, and Yan was upset that there was no room for anyone else. The new recruit Yang also watched the confrontation closely, where the fighting Lich lost the vessel of life but still did not die. The young man began to doubt his complete absorption of this vessel, which the ancient demon Lich had prepared in his dungeon. Just as he began to think about what would happen if the Mana Heart was activated and the remaining power of the vessel of life was depleted, Yang was forced to turn his attention to the battlefield. But there the battle was coming to an end, and Crown Prince Leon Cabalan had already raised his sword victoriously over the ancient monster Lich, seeking to strike him down. A huge stream of magical light appeared in the room, to the surprise of everyone present. Leon laughs at the demon Lich trying to flee the battlefield and does not understand the reasons why he is doing so, but the monster demands that the prince be silent. In this difficult moment, Lich felt his mana output decrease, and he had the feeling that his magical power was being sucked out of him. The ancient monster looked at Captain Rodrigo Mayer and recruit Jan standing nearby, and a sudden thought occurred to him. The 974th recruit gave a thumbs up, and the demon decided that this boy was the cause of his misfortune. To the monster, the young man was like a pathetic puppy who treated him with contempt. so Lich would not understand anything. The Crown Prince kept his eyes on the evil creature and tried to understand its behavior at that moment. Grabbing his clothes, Lich began to tear them apart and informed his rivals of his intention to take the body of one of them for himself. An exciting guess appeared in Leon Cabalan's mind at these words of the monster, who shouted that he no longer needed any body. Everyone saw a huge glowing eye with a red magical seal, and Lich continued to threaten the brave warriors around him. Tearing his clothes, the demon revealed a cosmic infinity with a glowing eye inside, and he was going to destroy all humans. This was expansion of possessions, a state in which the spellcaster's hidden desire is realized in reality, and it is used by the heads of the Empire's most powerful families. Yanu and Captain Rodrigo Mayer could only watch what was happening, but they immediately recognized this terrifying technique of the monster. No longer hoping for victory, Lich screamed in a demonic voice and wished death upon the brave and courageous descendant of Bahamut. The frightened Crown Prince, Leon Cabalan, suddenly realized the archaic monster's terrible intention to take them all to the other world. The monster's witchcraft-like eyes were reflected in Yan's eyes as he watched what was happening and could not allow anything terrible to happen to himself and the others. Now the 974th recruit of the training center needed to completely empty his mana heart to eliminate the otherworldly enemy. Gathering all his magical powers and the energy of the vessel of life, the recruit directed them at the monstrous Lich, wanting to finish him off once and for all. This came as a complete surprise to the terrifying enemy, but there was nothing he could do about it now. The demon tried to speak, but his fate was sealed. Leon, who was in full combat readiness, watched Lich's actions. Noticing the gap, the brave man activated the 5 senses of the yellow dragon, causing a magical glow. Prince Cabalan had to strike his opponent, but his incredible sword was immediately split into many pieces. Lich considered all the boy's attempts futile, because his technique of expanding his domain was activated, and Leon's pathetic attack would not stop it. Holding the stump of his sword forward, the brave heir to the Imperial House summoned the hellish monster to approach him. After that, Mr. Cabalan's weapon received a magical light instead of a blade to counter the evil magic of the terrible Lich. Thanks to the 5 senses of the yellow dragon's manifestation, a dragon sword appeared, and with its help, the noble warrior Leon was ready to fight the enemy. And suddenly, the room where the clash between good and evil was taking place was pierced by the terrible scream of the demon, who sensed the end of his days. Leon bowed his head. Today's victory was on his side. He had defeated a strong opponent in an incredible battle. The Lich, who was gradually losing his shape, did not consider this to be the end. But his opponent was firmly convinced of the opposite. The demon was finished. The rapidly melting Lich complained that everything had happened before his eyes and that it had all been in vain. For 1,000 years, he had secretly prepared his plan and held a grudge. But because of some boy, everything was lost. Lich reached out to Leon, but could no longer harm him. With his last ounce of strength, Lich, rapidly losing his power, reached out to the Crown Prince, whom he continued to call Bahamut. Continuing to wail, the monster believed that if all this had been done for Bahamut, then he had not lived in vain. The ancient monster's hand was also losing its tissue and was no longer a single entity, turning into dust and ashes. Only half of the skull remained of the huge, terrifying demon, and with his last ounce of strength, he tried to find out something from Leon Kabbalah, whom he saw as the Knight of Bahamut. After a moment, the ancient demon Lich disappeared completely, and the Crown Prince simply closed his eyes. Today was his triumph over evil. All that remained of the wizard Momin, reborn as a demon, were small fragments, now falling profusely onto the stone floor of Lich's lair. Leon Cabalan raised his gloomy and weary gaze, knowing that the vile creature was finished once and for all. The prince also understood that the Lich had used domain expansion, and if the technique had been performed perfectly, the people would not have been able to survive here. After completing this grueling battle with the monster, Leon was still weak, the fight having visibly exhausted him. This was pointed out to him by the captain who had come with Yan, who could not believe that he wanted to fight the demon himself, given his status as heir. But to Leon, it was all grumbling. The prince noticed the cadet with surprise and asked if he was injured, and Jan thanked His Highness for saving his life in the battle against the demon Lich. After that, Leon Cabalan ordered Captain Rodrigo Mayer to escort the cadet to the medical unit, and he had to obey. Thus, under the watchful gaze of the prince and the captain, the plan was carried out in the mountainous Blade Ridge, and the results exceeded all expectations. Arriving before everyone else in the monster's underground lair, the young recruit created a mana heart with the help of the Vessel of Life. And he managed to learn what the Crown Prince was capable of while watching his skillful and courageous fight with the demonic monster. Yang was extremely pleased, and he did all this with the help of the long-dead wizard Momon, thanking him for it. Outside the monster's lair, it was quiet and deserted, as if no deadly battle or destruction of the Lich had taken place. A fragment of the eliminated monster's outfit lay on the floor, left over after the demonic beast had dissolved. Suddenly, a light flickered inside the fabric, the same light that glowed in the dark and empty eye sockets of the skull of the resurrected sorcerer Momon. A large chandelier with many candles hung in the cozy room, capable of brightly illuminating everything in the dark hours of the day. On the long table stood exquisite glasses filled with a pink drink that Yang had not tasted in a long time. Reading a book, the young man remembered that he had often consumed it in his past life. Putting his foot up on the table in front of him, the conqueror of monsters in the Mountains of Blades continued reading. It had been a long time since he had rested like this. Recalling the terrible stance of the monstrous demon Lich, now everything that happened in the mountains seemed to the young man to have happened a very long time ago. Even now, the image of Crown Prince Leon Cabalan wielding his sword remained before his eyes. Now the 974th recruit, like other cadets, was in a place similar to a mansion, and all the aristocrats lived in similar places. This castle is very different from the 5-square-meter mass grave, with a bucket, a table, chains, and a cockroach where Yang used to live. And now the Special Forces recruit lives in an 84-square-meter mansion with a bed, a sofa, a shower, and food. Pulling himself away from his book, the young man remembered the exam he had done well on, as the results had recently been announced. At the ceremony to congratulate the cadets, the instructors thanked them for their efforts during the testing, even though the first test had been interrupted due to danger. But thanks to His Highness's courage, everything was quickly resolved, and the students were able to complete the exam safely, so they can be proud that they survived. The cadets listened to the announcement of the grades and learned that those who took 1st to 10th place would receive the highest score, while those who took 11th to 100th place would receive an average score. When the lowest grades for the remaining recruits were announced, the instructors discovered that the chief instructor had not come to the event. Continuing to reveal new information, one of the training center employees said that the assessment would determine where the recruits would live. The recruits were amazed to learn that those with the highest scores would have the opportunity to enter the Imperial Armory. This place holds treasures, books from the founding of the Empire, and all kinds of weapons, including hundreds of the latest swords. The library, which is comparable in size to an entire fortress, deserves a special mention. Those who took 1st to 10th place will live on the 3rd floor. Those who took 1st to 100th place will live on the 2nd floor, and everyone else will live on the 1st floor. When the results were announced, Roman took 5th place, even though he managed to defeat the largest number of rare goblins in the mountain range. Cruel Dwight, who took 4th place, single-handedly conquered the troll's lair and believes that the mentors are doing them a favor by not allowing them on the 4th and 5th floors. Casa Afrain, who conquered the orc village without injury, recalls passing the exam as an easy step, since everything went without damage. Unexpectedly for many people present at the event, Lorena Beowulf took only 2nd place, defeating the Golden Ogre single-handedly. The aristocrats are surprised by this, as they considered Lorena to be the best among them and do not understand who will ultimately become the leader. The girl herself, with a sad expression on her face, looked ahead and considered the rating completely meaningless. For this outstanding lady, 1st place was nothing more than an illusion, as she couldn't even cope with a real monster. She wanted to become stronger. But Cruel, who was standing nearby, ironically called his friend a princess who looked ridiculous. Dwight mockingly called Lorena a snob, as if she were capable of saving everyone. But at the same time, she had not yet managed to hold her own place in the rankings. They say that Lorena was able to stop Lich on her own, which is incredible. She is the pride of high society, but people ask not to pay attention to Cruel. Casa Afrain assured him that Dwight had gotten worse after Miss Beowulf's return, but the villain asked the girl to be quiet and told her about a new rumor. He looked at the recruit with the first number and assured her that she had not actually fought the terrible Lich. According to Cruella, his companion barely persuaded this pile of bones to spare her life after the unsuccessful confrontation. The unfortunate girl just looked silently at the unfriendly guy, but she was not going to tolerate these offensive accusations. Then, to the complete surprise of the 2nd cadet, the girl fully confirmed his words about the battle with the monster. Her own skills were not enough to achieve complete victory over the dangerous monster. Leaving Cruella, Lorena thanked him for his concern about the rumors concerning her and suggested that he worry about his own exam grades. Deciding to continue mocking the girl, Cadet Dwight called Miss Beowulf a good person and added something else. To the departing girl, the evil guy ironically expressed his hope that she would be able to take the place of the deceased Duke Beowulf. Hearing the words of her comrade in the Special Forces unit, Lorena wanted to respond, but the villain interrupted her. In his opinion, Lauren's brother was originally supposed to be the heir to the Beowulf family, but after his death, the title was vacant, although she wanted to get it. At first, Cruel said that today was a good opportunity for the lady to carry out this plan, but then suggested that she had arranged everything herself. If all this is true, then the second recruit considers Lorena to be a hero, but the girl is also ready to ask the young man her question. Turning to her offender, the unfortunate lady asked him a rather simple question about his death, because he could die right now. The embittered, Cruel Dwight waves his left hand and asks Mrs. Beowulf to look at him now. Calling on his magic, the guy considers the girl to be no different from him, and Cruel can't stand it when she acts like she's the only one. Then the magic only gained momentum and increased, and Cruel asked the girl to attack him, promising to deal with her in return. Just as the villain threatened to remove a certain mask from Lauren, someone approached from behind and grabbed the evil man by his right ear. Frightened, Cruel Dwight screamed in pain, not knowing who dared to do this to him, but someone behind him advised the villain to stay where he was. Recruit number 2 begged his opponent to let go of his ear, because he was about to tear it off. The aristocratic cadet from the training center, still kneeling, could not understand who his attacker was. At that moment on the upper floor, the instructor was about to announce the student who had taken first place in the exam results. It went to number 974 John, who was holding Cruel's ear, causing him to go in a shock and call the guy a savage. The young man who had fought with Lich continued to hold his enemy by the ear, while everyone else was surprised that a low-ranking cadet had taken first place. The recruits at the training center couldn't believe this outcome, and some had only heard of John without knowing him personally. With surprised and sparkling blue eyes, Lorena Beowulf looked at her comrade, not understanding how he had become the leader. An angry Cruel expressed his hatred for how such a guy could have achieved this and wanted to threaten him if he didn't let him go now. Yen looked coldly at the angry Cruel Dwight and wanted to know what would happen to him if he didn't stop holding him by the ear. Sensing the change in the recruit's mood, the villain stopped mocking him. He was just hurting now, nothing more. Yan and Miss Beowulf hadn't seen each other in a long time, but the girl asked her companion not to call her Miss, which he had to agree to. While the young man recounted how he met Cruel during the exam, the instructor finished announcing the results, and Jan was pleased that Lorena had no serious injuries. Even before that, Lady Beowulf had perceived Jan as an unusual person, but she couldn't believe in his ability to make Cruel fear him. In addition, the girl sensed a power in the young man that was ready to explode at any moment, so she didn't understand what had happened to him. Lorena wanted to ask the young man a couple of questions, but now she could only say one thing, so she immediately turned to John. Coming closer, Lady Beowulf told him how Cruel had been insulting him for a long time, but the malicious aristocrat tried to deny it. Cruel immediately denied the girl's words, calling them a lie, but then screamed louder and louder in pain as the recruit Yan squeezed his ear. Yan received his quarters as a reward for first place, and now sitting around doing nothing turned out to be more difficult than the young man had thought. Now having access to the Imperial Armory, where the library was located, Yang took a book from there and read it in his spare time. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door, and all the attention of the 974th recruit was focused on it. Remaining focused, Yang allowed the visitors to enter his new room. The conqueror of monsters in the Mountains of Blades stared intently at the door, not knowing who could be coming to see him and for what reason. Finally, the door opened slightly, and the visitor wanted to know how Yang knew that a guest was standing outside, even though he himself had made too much noise. Chief Instructor Damien appeared in the doorway, and with his usual smile, reminded the recruit of some unresolved issues, making a lot of noise. Entering the room, Chief Instructor Damien began to taste the rosé wine, and Jan wondered if his boss liked the drink. The guy stood in front of his boss, who was sitting on the sofa, and talked about how he could have prepared in advance, knowing that Damien was coming, while Damien drank wine and called it tolerable. According to the Special Forces recruit, even if you hide from view, you can't escape the Chief Instructor's aura. But for the guest in the room, that's not true. John was curious how the Crown Prince had forced Damien to do this. The instructor was clearly worried about it, and Leon had indeed asked him to take care of the recruit's treatment. Returning to the training center, the Crown Prince suggested that Damien was just another of Yan's infatuations, which surprised the mentor. Now that Damien was present in the room of recruit 974, he listened to the man with extreme concentration. The chief instructor could do nothing about it and did not want to upset the Crown Prince in that situation. And unexpectedly for the Goblin Slayer himself, Damien, who was sitting imposingly on the sofa, announced his desire to kill him. With an unpleasant smile on his face, the chief reported on the arrival of a report concerning the county of Simon and number 52. Recalling that very large house, the man confirmed that it was uninhabited, but that was to be expected. However, no one had lived in that large room with empty windows for several years. John considered the captain to be an old fox who had a hand in this. He could have noticed that he was being followed and immediately began to cover his tracks. Allowing for the chief instructor's disbelief, Jan did not finish his sentence, as Damien would not accuse him of lying. It did not matter to him whether he was telling the truth or not. Pressing his foot on the floor, where magical dark circles appeared, the evil teacher is going to act on his own. Using the magical technique of the Sword of the Dark Spirit, Damien delivered a powerful blow to Jan, whom he considered completely useless. Everything happened so powerfully and unexpectedly that even the table on which the wine glasses stood was smashed into pieces. The chief instructor watched the events unfolding in front of him, where fragments of the magic sword were flying, considering the recruit already eliminated. Suddenly, the outline of a young man with a book in his hand appeared before him, and the recruit John himself believes that Damien does not necessarily have to kill him. Losing his typical ironic smile, the mentor was surprised by his opponent's ability to repel such an incredibly powerful attack. Remaining safe and sound despite the magic swords, Yang showed the book and told about the discovery of a very important piece of the puzzle. The evil Damien knows nothing about the puzzle or this book, although he sees that it is a study on energy interruption, judging by the title on the cover. Yang took this book from the Imperial Armory, as he was granted access to the third floor, where the main arsenal is located. But the young man decided to go to the first floor, where there is a special library with books and scientific research collected by past rulers. Most of the literature the young man saw was devoted to studying methods of subjugating the monsters of the kingdom. Choosing the right book, Recruit Yang examined them one by one, throwing them down on the floor, but he still could not find the material he needed. After a long search on the shelf, the 974th recruit of the training center stared ahead. Finally, he found the very scientific work on energy interruption, which was written by the captain of the organization, Rodrigo Mayer. Energy interruption is a disease in which internal energy does not circulate properly. With age, the energy of the sick patient dries up, and in most cases, they die before reaching the age of 20. Taking the book found by John and opening it to read, Chief Instructor Damien wants to know what the problem is. But this is strange to the recruit. He does not understand why the captain of the special unit would want to investigate energy interruption, since he does not seem to have such a disease. As a result of studying the material, Yan learned that Captain Rodrigo Mayer had chosen a very interesting topic to explore. He himself did not suffer from the condition, but his daughter, who stayed at home all the time due to a lack of energy, may have had it, as her symptoms matched those of the disease. In order to find a cure for his own child, Captain Rodrigo Mayer continued his research into this disease. Jan thought the officer was hiding his own daughter because she was his weak spot. But in reality, everything turned out to be completely different. Captain Rodrigo then decided to move for his daughter's treatment, because finding a good doctor was not easy, and Jan had been wrong from the start. Listening to the recruit, Chief Instructor Damien closed his eyes and suggested that the daughter was not Mayer's weak spot, but he did not understand Jan himself. According to the 974th recruit of the Special Forces unit, Damien would not be able to keep the captain on a leash with the help of his daughter. The young man was also confident in the ability of the recruit training center instructor to keep Rodrigo Mayer's life in his own hands. There is still no cure for energy interruption, and a large number of drugs are needed to maintain stable health. The captain himself would not be able to earn that much money, so it is clear that budget funds have been embezzled. The ideal place for this is a special unit commanded by Officer Rodrigo Mayer. And if evidence of financial embezzlement emerges, hunting down the old fox will be no trouble for Damien. Closing the book he had received, the chief instructor of the recruit training center, with his eyes closed, dismissed the young man's words as mere speculation. Agreeing with his mentor that these were just guesses, the young man was confident that he could bury the captain if it turned out to be true. Yen believes that they are not risking anything, and there is every reason to investigate this matter because stealing money is illegal. Still unwilling to look at the storyteller standing in front of him, the chief instructor repeated his last words and remained silent. Then Damien suddenly glanced at John's student and assessed something that had not been explained to them as not bad. The book discovered by the 974th recruit in the Imperial Armory Library flew back toward Jan. Catching it without any problems, the young man looked at the chief instructor with some apprehension, not knowing what his next steps would be. Damien had his own man in the Special Squad's audit team, so it would not be difficult to implement the plan, and Jan needed to learn more about this disease. For the surprised young man, it was incredible, and it seemed that everything had worked out, even though he had told the chief instructor only the truth. The captain really did steal money to pay for his daughter's treatment, and this news resonated with Jan in his past life, so he remembers it well. As if still dissatisfied, the chief instructor is about to clarify one point with his recruit. Having refused the opportunity to go to the third floor, did the new recruit of the Special Forces unit go to the first floor for the sake of this book and give up weapons? Jan does not understand the point of it if it cannot help the chief instructor, who was forced to agree on this issue. As he walked toward the door, Damien agreed to personally compensate the guy for this loss. And from now on, his training in the main program is complete. Surprised by the words he heard from the mentor of the training center for recruits, he does not understand what he has just said to him. Damien stopped and glanced out of the corner of his left eye at the astonished student, who had recently been fighting monsters in the Mountains of Blades. Now, number 974 is his student, and Yang is confused by the news that has suddenly fallen on him. But in the next minute, the brave guy smiled slightly, understanding all the benefits of such a training interaction. In fact, Damien really likes Yang. He is different from the other students he has met at the academy, whom the chief instructor has called puppies. Considering this a good way to get closer to his mentor, Yang wondered aloud if he deserved to be a student of the teacher at the training center. The mentor immediately reminded the recruit how he had skillfully attacked him from an ambush in the forest, proving himself to be a talented warrior. But in the end, the chief instructor caught the recruit anyway, and the latter is afraid that, considering himself an inexperienced cadet, he will tarnish Mr. Damien's reputation. The angry mentor shouted, demanding that the conversation stop, and was confident that the guy would become his student, almost calling him a toy. Finally leaving Jan's private room, the aggressive Damien ordered him to remember this and begin his training, no matter what. The 974th recruit of the Special Forces unit was left alone and was glad about it, as the instructor was already annoying him with his presence. Holding the pendant with the image of his own family in his hands, Yan wondered how he could get even closer to Damien from now on. Recalling his previous combat encounter with the center's chief instructor in the forest and the symbol on his body, Yang thought of him as his family's secret. Opening the pendant, the young man saw a reflection of a drawing that could tell him a lot about his missing mother and father. Looking closely at the symbol, the young man came to the conclusion that he had a huge chance to uncover this secret. For training activities, the Recruit Training Center had an arena consisting of several buildings, numbered 3. This vast, multi-level complex was only accessible to top-ranking instructors. Even cadets who came to the organization from noble families did not have the opportunity to train in this arena. Deserted at the moment, only one person was training in the arena under number 3. It was the monster slayer of the Mountains of Blades, the 974th recruit, Yang, who had already done a couple hundred push-ups. In an upright position, Soldier Yang performed the exercise on one arm, and his body muscles clearly demonstrated his strength. In one of the rooms of the third arena, where the guy was exercising, it was quiet and calm, and a long and large flag of the organization hung. After doing 200 push-ups, Yang decided to take a break. In his opinion, this place was dreary because he was training here all alone. Looking at his own figure, the young athlete felt changes in his body due to the introduction of the mana heart. But these changes were happening too slowly, and the recruit had to train for a long time to match his inner energy. Yan now had access to an arena with various cold weapons and shields where high-ranking instructors trained. There was no one in the training hall, and the guy remembered how those around him reacted differently to his privileges. For example, the 12th recruit, Roman, was angry and thought his comrade had decided to become a pathetic slave to the vile Damien. And Lauren, touched by Jan's success, wanted to see her secret friend in the incredibly talented cadet. The girl asked the surprised guy to say something, but he didn't like her constantly following him around. It seems that the instructor was impressed by John's choice of the first floor of the treasure room, but the book he found was just a ploy. He had another goal in mind. The old book fell to the floor below. The young man no longer needed it. Taking the other book in his hands, the guy smiled slightly, because that was what he was really looking for. Before him was a book about the founding of the empire, similar to an ordinary textbook, but in the future it would become a sensation, and it would be revealed that it was written by the founding emperor. Now the young man had the heart of mana, but he was still unable to use the divine dragon's breath to its fullest extent. In ancient times, this breath was created by Emperor Bahamut himself, together with the wizard Momen. Now, the 974th recruit needs the power of these two characters to quickly master the technique. He desperately needs the knowledge of the founding emperor. Yan feels sorry for Momen because they took away what the wizard had worked on for a long time, and then they killed him, which is a compelling reason to become a vengeful person. Finally opening the book, the young man decided to see if there was anything in it that would really help him in his investigation. At that moment, an expression of utter surprise and amazement appeared on his face, as if the young man had seen something absolutely incredible there. The pages of the book were completely white, with no letters at all. Not only the page that Yang had opened, but all the others were blank, even though the young man remembered rumors that the book had been written by the emperor who founded the country. He killed Momon in order to become the sole possessor of the divine dragon's breath, and that was probably why he did not write about it. A new thought appeared in the mind of the 974th recruit after receiving the emperor's book. While Yang was lost in thought about the strange find, he did not notice the terrible black hand hanging over his head. Sensing something was wrong, the young warrior turned around, but the training hall of Arena Number 3 was still silent and empty. With strong suspicion, the recent conqueror of the monsters in the Mountains of Blades looked into the far corner of the room where he was standing. He himself had just felt as if someone was watching him, but he didn't know who it was. Then Yang looked back at the book he had been studying intently a minute ago and noticed some changes. Everything was still there, but the pages were worn, and the upper left corner of the page looked as if someone had torn it off. The young man had an idea and struck the dark spirit where his invisible opponent might be. Using magic, Yang noticeably tore and slashed the white column that aroused his suspicion and fear. The student of the recruit training center tried to cut it now, but he still couldn't do it. The nimble and brave young warrior was still not as good as Damien, the chief instructor of the Special Forces unit. Suddenly, someone behind the column laughed in a voice very familiar to Yan and called him an idiot, causing him to be puzzled. The stranger, who was still hidden behind the column, loudly doubted the recruit's ability to unravel the mystery of the book. The young man, brave in battle against enemies, watched as the shadow of his rival gradually came into the light, recognizing his features. A second later, Moment appeared before him, his dark eyes glowing with fire, reminding the young man how long it had been since they last saw each other. Recalling their last confrontation in the underground lair, Yang did not understand how the demon had ended up here and managed to survive after those mortal wounds. The monstrous lich made eerie sounds that vaguely resembled laughter, and then, in that battle, he understood something. The monster hovered in the air and told the young man about some pathetic bugs that could become annoying if ignored for too long. And immediately, the ancient resurrected demon clarified that he was referring specifically to the 974th recruit, John. And he, in turn, stared intently at the demon and did not take his eyes off him, expecting a sudden attack at any moment. Suddenly, an incredibly bright light appeared in the room, as if thousands of sunbeams had penetrated it. Leaping at the young man, the monster lich promised to kill him immediately, seeking revenge for his heavy defeat in their previous confrontation. Yang was greatly angered by the sudden appearance and subsequent intrusion of the ghost, but he had to fight it again. From under the creature's hood appeared a face with long, light hair, promising to kill Yang at all costs. With his eyes wide open in complete amazement, Recruit John stared at Momen and his incredibly changed face. A girl with the magical seal belonging to Lich on her forehead rushed at the guy like a madwoman and threatened to take Jan's body for herself. Yan looked at the demon, but the dangerous creature's appearance did not fool him. Even though it looked different, it was still the same evil Lich. To eliminate the demon once and for all, the young recruit struck the monster with his powerful blow, but Lich, with a smug grin, simply flew past him. Laughing at the Special Forces recruit, the creature continued to fly back and forth past him, and the young man did not understand how this was possible. At first, Yang thought Lich was just a regular ghost, but then he remembered something called thought manifestation. Perhaps even after the transformation of Lich's vessel of life into Momen's mana heart, it remained in the form of a manifestation of his ideas. The creature posed no danger, In fact, it didn't even exist. But the demon flying back and forth, wanting to kill the guy, began to annoy him. Still in the training hall, Yang asked Momon to go to the other world, but he had an incomprehensible appearance and wandered around this world. The creature with the red magic seal only laughed in response to the questions of the young athlete from the recruit training center. The physique of the ancient witchcraft creature was not uniform, and it continued to mock the recruit Yang. All this time, Momon had been a walking corpse, but now she was able to regain the appearance of her days as a living sorceress, thanks to the effect of Yang's mana heart. Did he really think that the mage would simply disappear? And now that she had returned, she would be able to kill everyone, just like that guy, the descendant of Bahamut? A magical seal burned in the girl's eyes, and she vowed with fierce anger to eliminate everyone who had betrayed her. Strange changes began to occur with the flying Momon, which immediately caught the attention of Yang, a recruit of the Special Forces unit. The sorceress was getting smaller in size, but she couldn't do anything about it because it was more economical to use the girl's magical abilities that way. Remembering the previous terrifying image of the demon lich, the warrior did not understand how the sorceress would be able to take revenge on all people, as if she had undergone plastic surgery. Now the sorceress had a completely different appearance, but in her opinion, all people looked exactly the same on the inside, and moreover, it was their own fault. She maintains her manifestation only thanks to the energy of Yan's mana heart, but this connection is too weak to display her full appearance. The angry sorceress does not understand why, after drinking all those elixirs, Yan has such a low energy level, because any mutt would be stronger than him. It was rude for the guy to hear such words because at the moment it does not directly threaten him, but there is a certain point. Even Yan feels a weak flow of mana being transmitted to Momon, but the fact that this path is open suggests that the demon will be a hindrance to the warrior in the future. Right now, the training center recruit's enemy is one of the most powerful mages, and if she starts to feed off Yan in the future, he won't be able to stop it. While the young man was lost in his own thoughts, the sorceress flew up behind him unnoticed and raised her hammer above him. When the recruit noticed the girl, she pretended to be busy and put away her dangerous weapon. But there was nothing he could do, and the 974th recruit of the squad lowered the book he had picked up before Momon appeared. Yang was happy to meet the demon and wanted to see the world before disappearing, while Momon asked him not to tease him for his poor adaptation to the mana. When the sorceress became curious about how Yang would get rid of her, he pointed out her similarity to a human, so he only needed to sever his connection with her. During the conversation, the conqueror of monsters in the Mountains of Blades explained how the dangerous sorceress was parasitizing on his mana heart. Then he wondered if he decided to reduce the flow of mana, it was unknown whether the girl would be able to continue her manifestation. Looking back at the otherworldly demon Momon, the stern Yang recommended that he disappear, because his life had already ended. The resurrected creature began to rage again and bare its white fangs, believing it necessary to stay alive. The archaic creature's outline and clothing could be split into small fragments, but Momon did not want to disappear. No one interrupted the conversation between the sorceress and the man in the training room, and Momon assured him that the boy would regret the magician's disappearance. The young soldier still held the book of the emperor who founded the kingdom in his hands and believed that the demon wanted to learn the secret of Bahamut's book. Then he looked again at the scarred column behind which the wizard Momon had previously been hiding. The young man, skilled in the use of cold weapons, took his blade in his hands and began to examine it. Dark drops fell on the white blank pages of the emperor's book, becoming its gloomy marks. Yan knows about the need to sprinkle the book with blood containing the breath of the divine dragon, but he is not aware of what to do next. With the air of a knowledgeable person, the sorceress raised her palm and explained the consequences of gradually directing mana into the book of history. In this case, the blood turns into letters, as evidenced by the transformations on the pages of the binding. The young recruit stared in amazement at the book in front of him, where new letters kept appearing. For him, it was light and darkness, and these two components were now merging on the pages of an ancient book written by the founder of the empire. The writing seemed like nonsense to the young man, so he asked Momon if he understood the meaning of the strange words, but the demon did not know what Bahamut was writing about. Carefully studying the contents of the book, the 974th recruit who had defeated the monsters did not believe that the